Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and the press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting pages of the City Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to be filmed or recorded or any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Thank you. Margaret, do we have any substitutes, please?
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Denham for Councillor Norfolk and Councillor Scott for Councillor Gregson. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Collier.
I'm a member of Bike Worcester.
Thank you. Councillor Denham.
It isn't really a declaration of interest as such, but I am one of the City Council's representatives on the Shrub Hill Steering Committee.
Thank you. And then, Margaret, can you just note that I'm a member of Bike Worcester as well, please? Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Scott. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up there.
I'm also a member of Bike Worcester.
Thank you.
Me too.
Is anyone else a member of Bike Worcester? Not you at the back. Right. Okay. Any more? No. Okay, so we've got public participation. Each speaker will be given 5 minutes. I will start the timer. First of all, we've got Rob Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Folks, so I'm Rob Collier, Secretary of Bike Worcester. You all know me probably better than you'd like. I'd like to start by saying Bike Worcester is not funding any city councillor. We are not a nefarious group. You don't technically have to declare an interest in Bike Worcester as part of the City Council's constitutions. Thanks, Shane. We are open to the transparency. I would like to invite you all to be members of Bike Worcester. It's free. Bike Worcester would love to be the biggest party on the City Council. That is a joke. We're not a political party or a private company. So I'm here to talk on the pump track agenda item. Given our engagement in advance of the January PED meeting, it would be rude not to. So here just to share a few thoughts from our community on that. So I'll try and keep it brief to give others much more expert than me the chance to speak. So first thing to say is, the community is extremely encouraged by the progress that's been made on the pump track plans. We can be a grumpy group at times, and it's worth saying to officers, really, really delighted with the progress that's been made. And a massive thank you to Officer Alan New for the work that he's done. The officers have engaged really brilliantly with the Bike Worcester community. And we were at the event, the community engagement event in Batten Hall earlier this month, and it's been a great program to be part of. So massive thank you. I'd like to repeat the offer that I made in January to all members here present, but also other ward councillors, that we are a resource to be used for community events. We're constrained by the number of volunteer hours we have, but we're really keen to work with you in your wards to promote cycling, to promote active travel, and in specifically regards to the pump tracks and the pump track plans, if we can do community events to build interest and build kind of engagement and usage of those facilities, we'd be really delighted to work with you to do that. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. The second thing, just a note on why we think pump tracks are great, why Bike Worcester thinks pump tracks are great. I'm delighted to be speaking to quite a converted audience, certainly amongst members. They're visible infrastructure for cycling. They can be extremely inspiring for both children, but also for adults who are looking at the children and people using pump tracks. They're a great facility for activity, for physical health, and they can be quite affordable pieces of infrastructure. They reflect what Bike Worcester are all about, which is encouraging and enabling active travel. My final point will be a brief one. You know, we have really great engagement with the City Council on active travel issues. We have a really constructive dialogue with lots of members. We have a very constructive dialogue with active travel officers within the city structure. And, you know, I think broadly speaking, you know, we're really encouraged by the efforts that are being made amongst the City Council group. However, you know, the structure of Worcester means that the City Council has very little control over the routes and the kind of highways infrastructure that people can use to travel to these facilities. And I shared a note with you earlier today about, you know, the suggested sites. One of the reasons why Batten Hall Park is a great site is because it has really good active travel links to it. There are routes that are to a pretty high standard from lots of different directions along the river, along the canal, via County Hall. Purdyswell Park as a site is poor from an active travel perspective. And you know, if I were to cycle there with my children, the direct route is 1.5 miles, but I'd have to take a 3-mile detour. Cripplegate Park, which is always also referenced in the officer plans. If we have a strong cycling community in Dines Green, it's 1 mile from Dines Green to Cripplegate Park if you're walking or driving, but this family-friendly cycling route is 4.5 miles. Thank you, Councillor. It's 4.5 mile detour for a family who might choose to cycle from Dines Green to Cripplegate Park, which is on a map is super close. But if you're trying to cycle that distance as a family, it's a huge detour that you have to take. And whilst, you know, I can't criticise the City Council and members for not providing that infrastructure, it is a real barrier to those facilities. It's talking about pump tracks specifically. If you were looking to cycle to these facilities, it's a huge detour and an otherwise quite hostile infrastructure if you were to take a direct route. So, in summary, whilst the City Council has little control over the routes, you do have influence. You do have the ability to make it part of your evaluation criteria and to understand how people are going to travel to these sites. And I think we heard in the January meeting, driving, you know, families driving to these sites is not.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. That's your 5 minutes. You will receive a written response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Vallance. You have 5 minutes also. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So my name's Gary Vallance. I spoke in January. I'm a Batten Hall resident and I think officially a national pump track nerd, I think is fair. So back in January, the Batten Hall pump track project was on the agenda and I urged members of this committee to consider Worcester's younger generations and vote that the project be allowed to proceed while additional options and some mitigation were considered. Today, my thanks go to those who voted in favour and to the members of the City Council, including Alan Breen, Alan New and Lloyd Griffiths, whose workloads presumably increased as a result. Threatened by a long list of objections from a short list of people, the possibility of a play area targeted towards older children in South Worcester seemed very much in jeopardy. I'm hugely grateful that in the months since, additional expertise was brought into the process to address these concerns, allowing construction to begin. With publication last week of the very encouraging Worcester Play Plan document and the news of fresh track proposals for Claims and St John's, it feels like we're on the brink of something potentially incredible. Teetering between hope and fear, I have 2 main lines of interest. The first being urgency. For context, Rushwick's pump track went from proposal to completion in 7 months. Guided by Councillor Steve Hemsworth, who was in turn motivated by his young children. Years later, Steve's Litlands and their community continue to reap the benefits. By contrast, the first kid to publicly advocate the Batten Hall Park pump track is now thinking about GCSEs. With every passing month, even for a village track like Rushwick, hundreds of play hours are lost, scores of social connections never made, and thousands of individual and shared experiences missed. These projects can happen quickly, and they have to. The second area of interest relates to the design process. The most loved pump tracks aren't necessarily large or expensive, but well matched to their riders and settings. Engagement between project planners and local riders can be included in the design process to acknowledge user groups and germinate senses of investment and ownership. Particularly among older riders with more freedom to travel, local pride can be a big factor in the positive social impact that pump tracks can bring. All pump tracks are hand-built. The majority are individually designed to fit the engineering demands of their locations. With half a dozen suitably experienced companies ready to work here, each delivering their own style of modern pump track, this is a unique opportunity to provide a variety of riding experiences across multiple city locations at no additional cost. If nothing else, I hope that the issues overcome for Batten Hall Park can inform future processes to create a project delivery template that is rapid, robust, and openly documented, restoring public trust in community investment. For Purdiswell and for Cripplegate Park, I look forward to seeing early engagement with local groups and an emphasis placed on design individuality to create unique pump tracks that communities are proud to use and happy to share. As always, if I can help in any way, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vallance. You will receive a written response from officers. Thank you. Next, we've got Nicholas Dobbs.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm speaking on behalf of Play Worcester. Just to update councillors who may be unaware, Play Worcester is a relaunch of the previous Worcester Play Council, and I was elected chair in March of this year. Play Worcester's volunteer trustees and board members all have considerable professional expertise in understanding the play needs of children and young people, and also in its delivery. Our remit has widened, and our aim is to help make Worcester a vibrant and playful city. It's our aspiration to be advocates for children and young people's right to play across the city of Worcester, and to contribute to making it a wonderful place to grow up and live. We appreciate the updates on the progress of the first phase delivery projects as outlined in the Worcester Play Plan 2022 to 27, and the commitments of this council to improve play as part of the stronger and connected communities and a healthy and active city agenda. The Play Plan quotes from Play England, explaining that informal and incidental playable spaces can make innovative use of the public realm, allowing children to engage in play throughout their city and not just at specific play sites. By embedding play within the public spaces of the city, it is demonstrated to children that they are valued and their presence within the city is welcomed. We are keen to offer our support in whatever way we can. On Saturday, we held an event outside the Guildhall, attended by over 100 children and young families, to demonstrate this exact point of valuing children within the city. We were able to gather valuable data on how Worcester could become more playful and vibrant. This is something we would be eager to do more of, for example, by eliciting feedback from children and young people about destination and neighbourhood play facilities. That might involve the replacement of or addition to additional play equipment, or influencing the co-design of play spaces, for example in Cornmeadow Lane or Weyburn Close, the planned St Peter's Play project, and the improvements to Angel Place in the city centre. We note that in the play plan you wrote you want some fresh thinking about the outdoor play spaces that the council looks after, and encouraged other organisations to help you provide better playable spaces. I would therefore ask, would the City Council consider engaging with Play Worcester as they deliver their play priorities? Thank you again for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms Dobbs. You will receive a written response from officers. Okay, can we look at the minutes from the meeting of June the 3rd, please? If we do it page by page. Page 1. Page 2. And page 3. Okay. We are going to have a slight change to the agenda. We're going to do the bid item and then followed by the play project, just because we've got public participants here. So, Shane, can I ask you to present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, yes. This is, it's hard to believe that it's 5 years since we last did the Worcester bid renewal process, but it's something that has to be done every 5 years. And much of the process is governed by regulations, hence the rather technical recommendations that are required here. It's the committee should receive the proposals for the bid renewal. This is a requirement to produce a prospectus, which Sam, as Chief Executive of the bid, will talk us through. And we have to confirm that that agrees with what's in the bid regulations. I'm happy for that to be delegated for me to do, to go through the technical aspects of that to ensure that it is compliant. And we're happy that the bid is delivering what it should be delivering in terms of the regulations. Thirdly, it's necessary to instruct the returning officer, as that also happens to be me, which is convenient. We can do that here tonight, but it will need to be a recommendation of the council to formally approve that, so that is a requirement as well. And then finally, it's not a requirement as such, but obviously the council has a number of properties within the city, and we pay business rates on those properties and a contribution to Worcester bid. That amounts to around about £25,000 a year, so there is a financial interest in the council, and we need to make a decision as to whether we're happy to approve the process and to vote yes or otherwise in the City Council ballot. So I would seek again your agreement to recommend to Council that we do that. Okay, so those are the formal aspects of it. Really, we want to see now whether or not, I think Sam's going to talk a little bit about what the bid has done in the last 5 years, and then talk a little bit more about what the plans are for the next 5 years. And you've got a presentation, I think, have you? So you might want to do a bit of shuffling so everyone can see this.
I'm interested. I don't think they're the right slides. I could go with it, but you might have the wrong ones. Okay, so my name is Samantha McCarthy. I became Chief Exec in 2022, but I have been with the bid since 2015. So since coming in for the last 5 years, it was a challenging 5 years with COVID, cost of living crisis, and I think it really allowed us as a bid to think, what do the businesses need? How do we invest their money correctly? Bids have always been known to be that icing and sprinkles on top of the cake. It's been about putting on nice planters and decorations and events, but times have changed and we had to really evolve and pick up pace and keep up with what the business needs were. So we looked at investment. How could we make sure there was physical investment in the city? Instead of putting money into marketing and events, this was already being done by external, and it was brilliant that the city had already embraced different event organisers come in. So we looked at infrastructures. We looked at putting in festoon lighting into stuff that was never in streets before. So New Street and Friar Street never had Christmas lighting. They didn't have catenary wires. They had always felt like that forgotten street at Christmas. So to be able to put that infrastructure in place, that's a legacy for those streets, and that was what we looked at doing, was creating legacies that would live past the bid if that was what we needed. So the businesses really felt that value in their money being invested. Not only did it make the streets look more aesthetically pleasing, it created safer streets. If you walk down those streets at night time now, it has a completely different feel to maybe how perhaps another street does that's less lit. Even the bars had that difference. You know, you see people out enjoying themselves on the street. For Purple Flag accreditation, it's really sort of impacted that way, and you could see that change. We then looked at the security for stores. So how could we sort of give people reassurance, make employees feel safer, make their journey coming into work and leaving feel safer, that there's someone else around. We're very aware of shift changes in the police and when the times of lower numbers on the city are present, and that's where we made sure we had that visibility, that we could support everybody, public and our staff within the city centre. Our Safer Streets team actually save about 3,000 per month on average from recover and return from stock, but they also deliver with a number of first aid incidents, lost and found. They've dealt with lost children. They've had missing persons where we've had to help them get back to their homes. The Safer Streets is a lot more than what we used to have as a retail security officer. It's more about people focused. We had the safe space out today, and that just proved we had 7 incidents on a Monday in a short period of time, you know, and 2 of them were big mental health issues. So we're very much aware that's out on the streets, and that's where we can sort of deliver that extra service. I will ask for the slide to change, but I do think I have the wrong set here. I'm going to go with it. So a few notable projects, because obviously we're on bid 3 at the moment, and I'm asking you to take us through to bid 4. So I wanted to sort of give you a bit of an idea of how we were. So for bid 1, when we first started, it was all about city events. The bid set up motor festivals, food festivals. It was about bringing people in. The Ringo was one of the biggest projects the bid sort of delivered in that time, and the signposts, or the finger post signs that you see up in the city, that was bid 1. Can I have the next slide, please? Bid 2, we worked on brand identity. We joined up with the City Council and we created Visit Worcester brand, and it was about finding a brand that fitted our heritage sites, but also had that modern element that we could engage. But when we put a message out, instead of having everybody with random different bits, we wanted people to recognise the city. We wanted somebody to see that and go, that's Worcester, that's the Shield. We see it everywhere. And you can now see it in how the Riverside has developed that branding, and it's all up on the signposts, and it's on Visit Worcester. It's the bid shield. It's linking everybody, that we can sort of have that identity there. Next slide, please. And then, like I said on bid 3, it was about people more than ever. COVID pushed us in that direction. It wasn't about it was about customer reassurance. To get that footfall back, we had to reassure people we were a safe city again. So bringing in the safe space was one of our biggest projects, and that was in for the nighttime economy. That was from doing the Purple Flag assessment in 2022. We shadowed police, we shadowed venues, outreach, we understood other people's jobs, and we could sort of see where the gaps were. We could see A&E figures were really high, and it was through intoxication. Now, because this intoxication is coming from our venues, we have a duty of care to make sure that our venues are looking after their customers. So by putting the service in, a lot of things, there are major things that go on, but a lot is just someone's had too much alcohol. They need a place to sit. They need somewhere to feel safe. They need some water or a cup of tea, and then they can go, or we can call their parents. And I think that tends to be a lot of the feedback we get on a regular basis. And Monday morning, we come into an email from a parent thanking our team for making sure their daughter is safe. And it's creating that positive customer experience that you can come out, and our venues all know the pathway. They all know the safe space. They're all linked through our radio system, and they use that to make sure their customers will come back to the city. We also have developed a training program. Staff retention it's harder than ever, especially for hospitality. They don't want to do the shifts. They don't want to do the unsociable hours. You went from a time of lockdown where you didn't have to go out on a Saturday night to all of a sudden that's your job and you're back out there. We developed training programs that gave the staff a sense of purpose, and to be able to give them that management program and upskill them. We did first aid training, catastrophic bleed. We put knife wound kits into all the different businesses for nighttime economy. So that they're all around, that anybody can grab them if that's needed, but the staff are all trained on it. We added defibs into the nighttime economy because, again, there weren't enough 24-hour defibs. The city sort of shut down at 5. So it was, how could we make sure that around our bid area there was a defib in a good, quick distance every time? And again, staff were trained on this. And it was used and it worked, and it sort of showed that value there. We now get asked by businesses, can we get one, and how do we do this? So people are really sort of taking that time to care and make sure their venues are complying. Upcycling existing infrastructure. So I talked about the wayfinding posts in bid 1. Well, they were starting to look a bit rusty, and as they do after 15 years. So we painted them up, but we contracted local artists. It was all about the community. We wanted them to put their stamp onto things. We did the electric boxes, and what we've noticed is tagging reduced. People respect art, they respect other people's work, and instead of giving them a nice blank canvas that they can go and tag, instead we've noticed it's completely dropped, and we've had such good engagement and feedback that it really became a positive project, and we managed to make the wayfinding look brand new, to the point our assessors at Purple Flag on Saturday said we have one of the best wayfinding they've ever seen. So I took that as a good plus on that side. And then it's adding a new infrastructure. So like I said, we put in festoon lighting, we put in catenary wires. We did this on the shambles as well. We looked at different areas that are lacking in areas. So the shambles used to only have one set of Christmas lights at the one end, at the middle, and in the middle there. Nothing in between. So again, we went to the businesses, we got the permissions, we put the wires up. Now they can have full sets of Christmas lights like everybody else. It makes such a huge difference for those businesses that all of a sudden feel like they're part of the bigger picture, and the light switch on and everything else. Can I have next slide? So I've just put a few pictures up of our sort of safer city for you to sort of get an idea of everything that I spoke about. We went through consultation with the businesses recently, and the key things they asked for was safer streets. They like that element. They want to see more safer streets officers. So something we're doing over the 6-week summer holidays is we have an enhanced safer streets officer program. So you will see 3 out at the moment, and they're covering between 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. The reason we've taken it later is to be able to observe that area, because we've had feedback from stores that they don't feel safe after a certain point. Some stores want to shut early because of the antisocial behaviour towards their staff members. So to have a team patrolling and have that authority figure that people will see, it should give more reassurance. When we ran a public perception survey, the same feedback came out, that the public feels safer when there's somebody there. It's okay to have cameras and radios, but that's not going to stop something happening to you. Whereas a professional adult who is there to observe and to be around can interfere. He knows what to do. A lot of people are scared to be that bystander now and interfere and stop something happening, whereas that's what their job is to do, even if it's just to say hello, to be able to stop something that could escalate. Can I have the next slide, please? The enhancements, we did the umbrellas, and it went on to Beautiful Britain, and the post went nuts, and we had people tagging saying we need to go here, and then they were putting their selfie pictures up. So something so simple actually really attract tourism. You had people go, that's the street I was telling you about. And it's done it again with the new installation we've put up. So we worked with the colour palette, but this time it wasn't just about putting something pretty up. It was about linking the city and wayfinding again. So you've got the colour palette up in Foregate Street. That's what you come into and welcome to the city. And then it's all around the other streets, and it all links. And that was sort of the key for us, was to be able to make sure we told a story this time. Thank you. Promoting the city. So we created a TV advert that went on to Sky. It was all for the heritage sites, and it was to target people to come over into the summer period. It really sort of helped boost the museums and the support on that side. We developed the Lantern Parade again. That was something the Hive always took on. However, with funding, it sort of stopped, and again, COVID impacted that. But we brought in the community into a big way, into the fact that the community sort of led the parade and the activities, and really sort of took ownership of that element. We do a lot of media, news reports, radio interviews. We write a column for the Worcester News Weekly. So we try and get ahead of anything that we think could be negative, and we write about it before it goes in, so they actually have that reasoning. And again, we've managed to build that rapport that they will come and ask us for information if they sort of find that we can try and make sure they've got the actual facts before it goes out further. Thank you. And obviously, it's the leadership between the businesses. So the bid lead on the Purple Flag, we're supported by all our partners. We couldn't do it without our partners, but we do sort of really take pride on making sure that the applications are in and it's correct and we've got everything and we can make sure we deliver that success. We lead on Best Bar None, so we make sure that all our venues are all accredited. It's about setting the standard for us and making sure that it's nationally recognised. Purple Flag is nationally recognised, Best Bar None is nationally recognised. You come to this city and you know that we're abiding by everything. Thank you. So we went to consultation back in March. Again, we've had over 50% of businesses come back. We've taken on the feedback, and that's helped us develop the next business plan for the next 5 years. Can I have the next slide, please? This gives me a break. Oh. It might give me a break.
There is some.
I might have to talk the whole video through. They all said we were great. I mean, I can, yeah. I'll send you the video and you can send it all around and have a look. This is public perception. So this is what's helped us develop the next business plan. So with the consultation from the businesses and the public perception feedback and then our own observations through Purple Flag, we developed how the city feels. We understand our red zones, and red zones isn't always because of crime. Red zones can be because there's a graffitied area. And to a perception, that looks unmanned, and it doesn't look like somebody's watching it or caring about it. Now, if we can remove that, that element changes. So, for example, we recently did the doors at Dicebox that were constantly being tagged. They kept painting it, kept being tagged. We've put a beautiful piece of artwork into place, and all of a sudden it's changed that vibe on the street. I just need the Argos building. That's next on my list. But there's things that we can really change, and then that public perception on that street makes you feel safer because you think somebody cares for it. Can I have the next slide, please? There's nothing on this slide. Okay, I'll just talk it through. I don't need the slides. So for the business plan, we set 3 different categories. So it's bid for safety, bid for change, and bid for success. For bid for safety, we proposed that we would like to expand our Safer Streets programme. We currently have 1 officer. These 6 weeks are giving us that chance to see what difference we can make by expanding the team, by expanding the hours, and increasing that presence on the street that you feel. As I said, 1 officer has managed to recover and return £3,000 worth of stock a month. What could 3 of them do? How could it look? How could we make people feel safer? The perception map that you saw before, if you have more people walking around in those red zones, how does the perception feel again? How can we change somebody just from a member of staff walking around, making people feel safer and high vis? Looking at a plan for antisocial behaviour. Now, something we've done this summer is we've joined forces with Lightbox, and we've set up the base. The base is for youth between 11 and 17. There's free food, free drinks, free Wi-Fi, places to be, activities, cage football, Xboxes, table tennis, pool. It's about giving them a place to be in the city. We're very much aware they tend to go to McDonald's, Starbucks, Greggs. It's cheap, there's Wi-Fi, and they can be in there. However, what we don't want to do is disperse the young people out the city. They're the next generation to take over. So how do we embrace that? How do we give them that place to be? So this summer, what we've done is created cards that McDonald's, police, security guards can give them to say, go get a free drink at the base. Again, if this works, this is a project that could really be taken off and be every summer or after school and give that sort of support. The safe space. The safe space, it activates on Friday and Saturday, but we're proving from coming into the daytime that there's a real need there as well. And it's making that safe space available for everybody. And that supports your daytime economy and retailers and businesses as well as the nighttime. The safe space currently has been running for 6 months, and we have had figures back from NHS that we have saved 28,000 per month on average. So that's been a real success to us already. For change is working with the students that we have in the city. We have the university, we have the colleges. How do we keep those skills in the city? How do we bring them to the businesses and stop them going from somewhere else? We were with a group of paramedic students today who've just finished, and they're all talking about going back off home, but then actually you're like, well, what about the opportunities here? And we actually had one say, I'd like to work with a safe space. So it's about creating opportunity and getting that skill set to stay with us rather than us train them up and then they go and deliver somewhere else. Invest for Worcester. So Invest for Worcester is looking at the vacant units. How can we sort of make sure they're filled? How can we work with different partners, with different groups, and ensure that our numbers stay level? We've been done really well, to be honest, over the last 5 years. And what we've noticed is people move units in the city. We don't tend to drop percentage. It's if you see a vacant, it's because somebody's moved to a bigger premises. But now we want to attract new investment in as well. And for success, it's continuing those seasonal campaigns, the infrastructure, the designs that we put up, the Visit Worcester brand, building loyalty between staff and residents. We're currently about to release a members card for staff. Times are tough. You know, we need to make sure that things are easy and that as an industry we support each other, and that's something the BID can deliver for our staff members. These have a lot of different opportunities, each category, to be able to work with different services and to really sort of take on the business needs. Look at events, look at how we can sort of work with the businesses to actually create their own events rather than us leading it. And I think that's more important, is when there is a light night, how do you make them all activate and come alive on that? And the Christmas fairs and things like that, and being able to be more spontaneous on that element. So that's where the BID will ensure that we work with the businesses for that success side. And that's me.
Thank you, Sam, for that presentation. Do we have any questions for Sam and the BID team or Shane? Councillor Pingree.
Yeah, I just have a couple of small questions. And thank you for the presentation and for the report. It's really fantastic what you do and what you have been doing and what you're planning on doing. It's really great. You mentioned in the report something called MATG.
Yeah.
What is MATG?
MATG is the multitasking agency. So this is police, city council come on, so I know you've both been on. It's housing. So we look at different issues. So mainly it's around ASB. So we'll have a list of people that we need to look at, and it could be a housing issue, it could be in the street, and between the partnership we come up with an action plan. That means we can support them to get out of that stage.
Cool. Okay, great. And the other thing I want to ask is, in the budget you say that you get £30,000 comes from additional income. Where does that additional income come from?
Through sponsorship. So over the last 5 years we've actually generated 400,000 extra, which is actually the same amount as a BID year. So we've managed to give 6 years and 5, and that's from going to the PCC and working with them. So the safe space was funded, the actual van was funded by the PCC. So it's trying to find those pots of money. We're about to apply for National Lottery to see how we get on with that, to bring more investment into the city centre.
Councillor Alcott.
Chair, thank you. I have a number of questions, if I may. So, and I am new to PED, so bear with me. Okay. Obviously, you talked about consultation with the business community and over 50% response rate. I think looking at the paperwork, unless I've misunderstood, it says that 270 people out of 600 engaged. So did you go back and you still?
We're still doing it because we had it in that sort of time period, but we're still talking to them because obviously this plan is in draft. it's basically what we've got, and most of them are agreeing, but we just want to make sure we've got as many people who have their chance to give their views as they can.
I think as well as the online communication, have you met many businesses, or do you meet as
Face to
groups
face,
just to get a
yeah.
sense?
So we do business breakfasts where we've consulted with them and sort of updated on projects, but we also go one-to-one. So we printed booklets of the consultation, so we could go into each business, explain about the projects and if they needed any questions, but so they could fill it out by hand as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think just moving on as well, I've had a few local businesses where they've had concerns that they're very happy with everything that's being done around the nighttime economy, but not all businesses run the nighttime economy, and some feel that they're maybe not getting the best value for money if they're not part of that. So how do they best address their concerns? Do they come to the committee or to yourself?
To
or
come to us.
just-
We do monthly breakfast meetings, so to attend one of those would be the best opportunity. Our doors are always open, so they can always come and see us direct or email us. The thing with the bid is it's their money and it's their business plan, and we act as their managing agents. So if they want their projects, they need to talk to us. No, that's what we need. We need people to talk to us to be able to make sure we can deliver for everybody.
Thank you. I think just following on, obviously you've talked about safety, and again, I'm not sure if it really fits with this committee, and certainly with Bike Worcester, all respect, there are lots of responsible cyclists, but I'm getting an uptick from residents who are having problems in the city centre with the Deliveroo drivers. I had one this morning who got off the train. Is that something that would come under your remit, or would we go to the Safer Neighbourhood team or to address that? It's probably not yours, is
I think it's probably more in the council team, to be honest, is the bikes and the public space protection orders.
I think we've had a change on how we're addressing that.
Can we just get some clarification from Lloyd, please? Thank you, Lloyd.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, the PSPO has been stood down, so we no longer have that PSPO. So the only powers available for tackling dangerous cycling sit with the police. So if there were any issues, they need to be directed to the local SNT team.
Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking about stations, I mean the gateways into the city. Are you involved very much in Foregate or Shrub Hill as the buildings themselves? My husband is the friend of Foregate Street Station. It would be nice if there were some others, you know, to join us.
Yeah, we are involved. We work with Nick Kay for the regeneration project very closely, and Foregate Street Station has just had a new sort of management team, so we've met all their customer engagement officers and are very keen on making a difference to the fact they'd love a big giant Christmas tree outside the station, and they'd like to engage more with businesses outside. So we've actually just done the Worcester Waddle windows for them. It's the first time we've actually had the stations properly engaged. They're now on a radio system, which is great because they can give us those sightings now of people coming in and out of the city that we need. So I think with the new management in place, that's really going to support us from changing it to the fact they might be able to get us different permissions to do up different areas of their station as well, which would support.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. It's clear, it's really evident that Worcester City Centre is doing well and bucking trends of national decline, and I'm sure that's down to the success of the businesses working through in the business improvement district. As well as business, we've got a growing, vibrant residential community in town, and many of the blocks which developed over the last few years are getting quite active in terms of residents' association and their own community groups. Very important stakeholders in the future of the city, the eyes and ears for businesses, customers, for trade. And we'd be delighted to make sure that we can facilitate the business improvement district, that you can hear the voice of our important local residents.
Yeah, I would be delighted to do that. We recently did a project down on Broad Street where we redid the patch of land. We got the licensing from county to redo that. We had it all dug up. The amount of stuff we found in there was horrendous. But now it's beautiful and it's a sensory garden and it holds all the 5 senses. It's lovely. But the residents of Broad Street came out and asked us, who we were we the council, what are we doing? And we explained a bit more about ourselves. And they were like, well, we'll let you know if anything ever happens. We've got Ring doorbells. We'll be able to tell you if anything happens on this area. And they really took pride in it. We were able to talk to them about their litter, because I know on Lower Broad Street, you can come in the mornings, it's everywhere. So we've been able to support with girl sacks. And actually, yes, they're for the businesses, but it's making our streets untidy too for our businesses. So it's how can we help those residents? So to hear their voices is really important on perception as well as anything for us to be able to impact.
Councillor Riaz.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I say what a wonderful report that we've received today. Clearly, there's been a serious amount of work that's been going on with the city, but I just want to concentrate on a number of points. And just looking at this sort of from an ideological perspective, actually, I mean, traditionally bids and economic development is seen as a capitalist sort of venture in the protection of the economy and the growth and etc. like that. But you've stated specifically, I mean, through design, I would say, as a result of COVID, you've decided to focus on people. And focusing on people, as a result of focusing on people, how much benefit you've brought the economy, you've saved thousands in NHS costs, you're providing play, and if you're not careful, you know, you'll be treading on the toes of Worcester Play Council here at the back.
We're going to join forces.
Yeah. But all these services were once provided at some level by the state and have been cut or have been, through, drastic underfunding of our youth centres, of our police, of our NHS. All these services you've picked up in that sense, and you've made a difference not only to the people that are using those services, but you've made a difference to the businesses as well. And this is a perfect example and a great showcase, I think, to take nationally in terms of how this bid Worcester has approached its place-based shaping and in its approach to economy. I think it should be congratulated and should be taken to a highest level. Actually, just by focusing on people, their issues, their mental health issues, how we address with them. We're reducing burglary, we're interacting with the businesses, we're interacting with all these different agencies, and you've just taken it from just a microcosm of just dealing with businesses and just giving a value of what they're trying to get, but just looking at actually the complete picture here, what issues businesses faced in terms of number of thefts, in terms of staff aggro that they get from difficult customers or mentally health issues. You've just taken that and just in your package and what you're delivering. And what you're delivering is over and beyond what a traditional bid does. So I just wanted to put that on record, and you should be congratulated.
Thank you. And I think it's just worth noting that quite a few of the things that we do, it's about indirect. It's not always that direct benefit for a business. But by what we do, encourages students to come to our university, people to buy homes, send their children to our schools, invest in Worcester as a business. So that's more important, to be able to make sure people come to us and choose us. And like what you said, we actually have a lot of different cities approach us. So when we developed the Safe Space, we worked with Manchester and Bristol to tell them how to do theirs. We're also the first bid to do our own billing with the council. And again, we have been talking to so many bids across the country, supporting Liverpool, Birmingham, Bath. There's so many that we've sort of interacted with. So Worcester is now the go-to for some major cities. So when you have Manchester Combined Authority knocking on your door to find out, how do I do a safe space and can I come and visit you? I'm like, yes, you can. So we have really sort of put Worcester on the map, as to speak, and that's always been our aim, to be able to do that.
Councillor Collier.
To be honest, I wish to land the community perspective that Councillor Riaz already so skillfully shared with us. So I wanted to echo that, and thank you so much for the report. And I'm a big fan of playfulness in our city centres, and I just wanted to comment on that city centre art and the playfulness that brings, and so heartened about the positive framing of the place of young people in our city centre, and what a brilliant venture that is going forward. And I really really very excited about that in the future as well. So thank you so much.
I have a question, if I may, please, Sam. I wondered, this is going into 2030. I wondered how the bid plans to support businesses into the low carbon and net zero economy, please. And thank you for your work. I've really enjoyed this report.
So I think this is where it is the partnership level and working with different, so we've already worked quite closely with the LEP and the council and different areas on that. The university are actually going to be delivering training for us on being able to get your business to net zero and things like that. So it's, again, it's working with the education system that we've got in place that understand it. I mean, Katie Broom at the university, she's brilliant. She understands all that. If you're going to bring someone in, let's use the expertise we have in the city. So it is about working with the businesses individually and giving them that sort of skill set. And we can already see some businesses are actively trying to do that and to sort of support that going forwards.
Okay, are we ready to move to a vote? I'm suggesting that we take these on block. So that is recommending that the committee approves the bid business plan 2025 to 2030 and confirms its conformity to Regulation 4 of the bid. Sorry.
I
Helen,
kind
sorry.
of got a comment to make upon the report, you know, having heard, moving on from the presentation, I thought there'd be some at least discussion on the report before we go straight to sign off the recommendations. That's all.
Sorry, would you like to make a question?
No, I want to make a comment, if I may, please, Chair. I mean, the presentation, you know, I'm familiar with the bid and being, you know, the city centre councillor for the last 12 years, enormous admiration for everything that's been achieved over that period. What was really helpful about this report is actually explaining the role of the City Council in relationship to the bid, because to be honest, that's always been pretty opaque to me. But here we have clearly sort of got set out our responsibilities with them, the fact that the council owns land within the city centre and that we are a contributor to the bid financially as well as a beneficiary from the bid, and that actually, you know, we, the council, have a vote in terms of continuing with the bid. So I thought that's extremely helpful, and actually I know it's valuable for us as councillors to understand that. And the the financial contribution from the council, because of the properties and the value of the properties that we own in the city centre, we're due to pay just over 25,000 into the bid levy, and I think that's excellent value for money, for the benefit that the city overall achieves for that. That's I thought it's important to make.
Okay, we're ready to move to the vote now. So if you're happy to take them on block, the recommendations are that this committee approves the bid business plan 2025 to 2030 and confirms its conformity to Regulation 4 of the bid regulations 2004. Delegates approval of the bid operating agreement and baseline services to the Corporate Director of Finance and Resources. Recommends this council to instruct the returning officer to conduct the bid ballot, and recommends the council to authorise the managing director to vote yes in respect of the City Council properties in the Worcester City Business Improvement District ballots. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Apologies. So now we're moving into the Worcester Play Plan Priorities Update Report, and I'm very pleased that Lloyd is here to introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In a similar vein to Shane, I can't believe it's 12 months since we approved the Worcester Play Plan. Doesn't seem that long. And this report sets out the progress we've made against the priority list of projects that members approved back 12 months ago, and then also seeks approval for how we'll approach the plan over the next 12 months. Just in terms of progress, paragraph 3.1 lists out the key items, really. Pleased to say we've recently finished the Horizon Mugger and Youth Shelter, which has been a great project and certainly fed in from local youths. Cotswold Play in the Way project, we now have a final design to be able to consult on, and we'll be looking to consult in the next several weeks again, looking to use local stakeholders as well as sort of general traditional communications. Members will be well averse with where we are with the Batten Hall pump track. It was referenced earlier. We've recently held the community engagement event around the mitigation plan, and we will be looking to commence works during mid-September, and that will be a 4 to 5 week build out. Paragraph 3.2 lists some of the other projects as well. So we've done some preliminary work around Gilham Street, with more work to follow later on in the summer. And there have also been several very local, hyper-local green space and play initiatives, which have certainly been backed and promoted by city councillors working with local stakeholders as well. And more recently, members have also agreed to invest into the section of Worcester Woods that we own to upgrade the pathway network there, so that will benefit all users of the woods. As well as progressing with the priority projects, I'm personally also really pleased to say, and I hope members have seen this evidence of this within their own wards, we've certainly got on top far better with the maintenance works. Members will be aware we've cited in the past issues with COVID. I've been able to catch up with some long-standing issues around play maintenance. But pleased to say we now have a full-time operative in place from the minor works team who's concentrating on play areas. And that has led to us being able to sort of catch up with some of that backlog, albeit there may be some outstanding. And we've listed in paragraph 3.3 some of those areas that we've tackled. And I think simple things as well, like jet washing the surfaces of play areas. Having visited some of the play area surfaces were beyond. And again, we've got on top of that using the council's hit squad to improve those. One of the really important areas for us was around accessible play. Although there may be little sign of actual physical improvements, there's been some work going on behind the scenes, certainly learning more about that. So we've been involved with online webinars with Scope on accessible and inclusive play. We've met with the County Council to discuss the possibility for improvements at Worcester Woods with our support. And we've also carried out initial work at both Gallivelt and Cripplegate to consider localised improvements that we can make. And again, the report references in 2 or 3 sections the funding bid for Gallivelt and Cripplegate and our wish to see accessible toilets and change-in-place toilets put into both those sites, because sometimes it's not just about physical adapted play, it's about the supporting infrastructure around it as well to make families' days that little bit easier. Consultation with County Highways, and we're hoping to drop 2 disabled parking bays to support the Batten Hall Park pump track. And we're also looking at an adapted piece of play at the Green Hub to meet the requirements of local children with additional needs. As I say, the Levelling Up 3 opportunity was very welcomed, and we've included within that bid, which has gone through P&R committee, some set aside for Angel Place and some youth space improvements. Again, perhaps not quite what we'd all traditionally think of as play, but more social space that would sort of benefit that youth element. And again, that will be certainly consulted on, not just in the traditional way, but with local stakeholders, including young people themselves, and that's to support the wider Angel Place redevelopment. And as I say, the Music for Everyone at Cripplegate Park and Gallivelt Parks, 1.3 million to invest in outdoor music performance spaces in both those premier parks. And again, where possible, we will try and build in some play element to that as well. Just moving on in the report, So the priority projects for March 2026. So we've set out here where we wish to prioritise our focus and time for the next year. But I think it's important to remind members that we need to remain flexible and agile, because if certain opportunities present themselves throughout the year, then we need to be in a position to look at those if there are delays, for instance, with others. So the first one is around the additional pump track provision. And again, through the reports that we brought through on Batten Hall pump track, there was an approval there to go off and do some work on an additional location, and that initial feasibility work has now been done. So there were a number of sites assessed, and we've included those within the report. And the learning that we've taken from Batten Hall pump track, we've applied that to that sort of high level of feasibility exercise for the sites. So 8 additional locations were identified and analysed. A few of those we feel aren't worthy of taking forward due to a variety of complexities, those being Digless playing fields, Gallivant Park and Northwick playing fields. But the one we are proposing this evening, or seeking members' approval for, to sort of move into that next stage of feasibility is Purd as well. In terms of feasibility, when you think about parking, when you think about welfare, when you think about access, I think Purd as well is a really good site, particularly for a destination site. So that's not just people sort of walking to site, that's people driving there looking to spend half a day, a full day there. And it's got that wider sort of infrastructure as well. In terms of looking forward to destination level all age accessible play, we've mentioned the levelling up funding opportunity. So that's something that we are seeking members' endorsement for this year, and I suppose in some way that's already been done through the P&R committee approving the bid. But just to remind members, Gallivant Park and Cripplegate Park, part of that bid includes changing place toilets within the works. We'd also like to do a bit more work around Gallivant and Cripplegate, just looking at how we can make it generally that bit more accessible and inclusive. And what I mean there is how we can sort of physically adapt it. You know, are there different types of equipment we can put in there to attract a different audience. And the other thing we'd like to do is engage the consultancy expertise of PIPA, Plan Inclusive Play Areas, to undertake some baseline audit work for us at those 2 sites and Worcester Woods, before we can then go out and engage and consult local residents and disability groups on what our plans are. Youth provision, I've mentioned Angel Play, so I won't go over that one again. And then the final section on the sort of plan for the next year, neighbourhood and doorstep level play. This is where we feel we can utilise the Section 106 contributions that we have from approved planning applications. And in Appendix 2 of the report, we set out the money that we currently have through Section 106. Now, obviously, Section 106, we need to take account of locality and spend deadlines, but we should be trying to flex that as much as possible. And again, I draw members right back to when we approved the play plan. It was all about mapping the gaps. Where were the gaps that existed in Worcester? We used sort of 12 and the 15-minute PED shed type exercise for us to be able to look at where those gaps are. And coming back to that and keeping that in the front of our minds, the 2 areas that we'd like to focus on for 25-26 are Corn Meadow Lane in the Claines ward and Weyburn Close within the Lower Wick and Pitmaston ward. They are the wards that clearly stand out as having gaps in terms of the Worcester Play Plan exercise. There are also 2 allocations of Section 106 for St Peter's, one that's been around for a little while, Power Park, and then obviously more recently the Taylor's Lane development. And again, we'd like to sort of combine those and look to do something in the St Peter's ward, again, based on community engagement with stakeholders. And then finally, Chair, just in terms of the resource that sits behind this area of work, there's been a few references to a couple of Allens this evening, and I'd acknowledge the amount of work that's gone into progressing the Worcester Play Plan, but we'd like to do things a little bit quicker. And in order for us to do that, we do need some additional resource. So again, the report is asking this evening to take some of that Section 106 contribution, which is in line with how we deal with other projects across the council, whether they be sort of property related or green infrastructure related, take some of that money and put in some additional resource to support Alan around the work that he does. And paragraph 5.1 there sets out the sort of range of work that's carried out. And with that, we hope that we can make good progress with the existing projects, but also the projects that we've set out that we plan to progress for the next year. So we've sort of allocated £106,000 for that additional resource, but that would still leave over £900,000 to be able to spend on direct play infrastructure. So just to come back to the recommendations, Chair, there's a range of noting and decision recommendations. 1.2, I'll go through the decision recommendation. 1.2 is asking members to approve the progression of Purd as well as the preferred location for a destination play site based around a pump track. 1.3 is asking members to approve the list of priority projects up to March 2026. And then 1.5 is asking to approve an allocation from the Council's collected Section 106 and SIL funding to provide that additional staff resource to support delivery. Happy to stop there, Chair, and take questions.
Thank you, Lloyd. Before we move on to questions, we've got Councillor Mace who would like to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the officers who worked on the report. It's really exciting to see the progress that's been made on play in the city. I think it's kind of interesting the points that Rob mentioned earlier. I am also a member of Bike Worcester, and I will also try to be brief as both my kids are patiently waiting. Part of the consideration of play that I think is missing in the update at the moment is not just physical distance, but also ease of accessibility on foot and cycle. And I think with the mention of the pump track at Purd as well, which I think would be really great, and many of my residents would be very happy to use it, being somewhere that people would drive to, that highlights the issue I want to bring up, which is basically the areas of the city which are enclosed with roads that make it difficult to access play facilities on foot or on cycle. So currently, St Stephen Ward contains 0 play areas. There are a number of great play areas just over the border in Gulliver Park, Bishops Avenue, Purd as well, and the Gillam Street Mooga, with Brickfields also close by. I have raised the lack of play in the ward with officers, and they have said to me fairly, I think, that ward boundaries aren't a concern for residents when it comes to play, which is absolutely right. Residents don't know where those are, but I think there are barriers that are on the borders of St Stephen that prevent people accessing play, which is what I want to highlight this evening. So I've emailed over 2 maps to all of the members of the committee. Hopefully you've seen those. The first map shows the new boundaries of St Stephen Ward in black. The second map overlays the ward with a red box that represents the real barriers to residents who want to access play on foot. So in case you've not had a chance to see the map, this is the area enclosed by, starting from the north and going clockwise, Bilford Road, Aswood Road, Green Lane, Merriman's Hill Road, St George's Lane North, Barbourne Road and Droitwich Road to its junction with Bilford Road, which encloses the bulk of St Stephen Ward, and it's enclosed by these large, busy roads. And one of the common themes I hear on the doorstep in St Stephen is that, about the speed and the amount of traffic on these roads and the difficulty crossing them. Part of this box is Green Lane, which is now entirely in Rainbow Hill Ward after the boundary review. The limit here is 20 miles an hour and it has speed bumps, so it should be one of the safest roads in the city. But in 2018, a child was knocked down by a motorist on Green Lane, and the County Council risk assessed it and said it was too dangerous for a lollipop person. That's not the most recent incident on that road, but it was brought to mind recently when somebody mentioned that a lollipop lady was, or lollipop person, sorry, was asked for on Wisley Road, and the council came back with the same response, that they'd risk assessed it and it was too dangerous to have somebody employed to help children cross the road. So it's okay for children to cross with a parent, but not for somebody to help them cross. Now, thankfully, that bit of road, thanks to the work of Paul Denham and Matthew Jenkins, now has a zebra crossing on it. But crossings like that on these roads are very few and far between. Also highlighted on the map in green is the canal. So this presents a possible way out of the box on foot to access Purd as well and Lansdowne Park. But this has its own issues. Again, residents on the doorstep tell me that they feel threatened by cyclists going too quickly along the narrow towpath, putting them or their children in danger. And I know particularly there are elderly people who say to me that they don't want to walk on the towpath because of the presence of cyclists on there. I understand why cyclists use it. It's one of the safest ways to get in and out of the city centre, but that does lead to conflict because it's very narrow. The path alongside Bilford Locks has raised bricks on it, which is incompatible with pushchairs and mobility scooters. I've personally encountered an old lady using a Zimmer frame who was struggling a great deal to get up that slope. So it's just not an accessible route. And there is also the thankfully rare incidents, but we had one at the end of May where a cyclist was threatened with a hammer and a machete on there, on the towpath. And we had armed police on the towpath last week because there was an air rifle. And in the later times of the year, it's unlit, it's dark from the late afternoon. So again, it's difficult to get out of the box using that as a path. So taken all together, I think you can see there are real barriers to play for residents of St Stephen that can be solved by adding a play area within the ward. And I'm sure there are plenty of other places in the city as well that have roads that are blocking access for people to walk to play areas in the city. So I think we should be looking at, when we're evaluating where play needs to be invested, looking at not just the physical distance on the map, but what are the barriers between areas of the city that stop people being able to access what's already there. Now, there are, I think, solutions in St Stephen. It's not a place with a lot of green space. Obviously, the largest green space is Ashwood Cemetery. Probably not the most appropriate place to put a play area. But there is a small patch of green space off Dryden Close behind Elliott Road and Keats Avenue that I think could host a small piece of play equipment of the doorstep type. And children, like my own, who've been very patiently waiting, thank you, would deserve to have access to play equipment on their doorstep. In St Stephen, we currently have none. So let's fix that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mace. Right, questions and comments on the report, please. Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So we've got a plan up till 2026. How does it get built out from that point onwards? Can you just explain to me what the process might be?
Thank you, Chair. We're continually keeping the plan under review. As I say, we need to remain flexible in terms of opportunities that come up. But I think we did talk about setting out the longer term plan, sort of a 3 or 5 year plan. We felt that would be subject to change, for a variety of reasons. So I think what we intend to do, Councillor Desira, is not just bring you regular reports back on particular projects, but each year we will bring you a formal update on the Worcester Play Plan, the progress made, and then what the next 12 months looks like in terms of further projects.
Councillor Collier.
Thank you so much for this report, and I'm so pleased to see this level of detail and what an incredible amount of work that must have been. At the last meeting of this committee, I said that I was worried that we were going from project to project, and I struggled to see what the overview looked like. So it's positive to see at least the next 12, 24 months played out. Unsurprisingly, I have quite a lot of opinions, I'm afraid, but I'm going to limit it just for everybody's sake, and I can be in touch in other ways. But there's a couple of points I really wanted to make. First of all, really am trying to limit myself, Lloyd. I really am. First of all, just one comment on the pump track location assessment grid. Lots of things considered, which is brilliant. I was concerned. Maybe I've misunderstood, but whilst parking, for example, is listed as a consideration, active travel links and transport routes don't seem to appear on the grid. So how well connected that place is to active travel routes doesn't seem to have been considered when looking at these pump track locations, which feels to me like a little bit of an oversight, because that would be a way that lots of people would get to something that they use on their bicycle. So I don't know whether that's because of City Council's responsibilities. I think I am going to just have to use my chance speaking now just to challenge that narrative a little bit, and I just urge members and everybody here and the rest of the City Council to really kind of challenge and be more ambitious about how we talk about travel in the city. I understand that some people need to be able to park, and I understand why parking is a consideration. But when we fall into this narrative of needing a car all the time, we're really overlooking the massive health concerns from a physical and mental health perspective, air quality, the quite huge looming climate crisis we find ourselves in. And I just urge all of us to be really aspirational about how we're supporting the people of Worcester and their travel choices. So I found that frustrating. So my first point was just about why was active travel infrastructure not included. The second thing I wanted to talk about was it was absolutely wonderful commissioning the consultants that created the Worcester Play Plan, because that's such a brilliant piece of work. And I just had a question about, you talked a little bit about it, the use of further consultants for the inclusive play. And I just wanted to ask a little bit about the purpose of the second use of consultants and how this will progress things, and how that wasn't met in the first piece of work that was done. In fact, actually, I'm going to stop there for fear of annoying everybody too much.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first one, even though it may not be cited within the grid, we've certainly thought about it. But I think, if I'm being totally honest, given that this is a destination pump track, then the reality is it is likely to be significantly attended by people with cars. So, that's not to say we don't want as many people cycling and walking there, but there is a reality here. And you go to any destination pump track site, I know we've got experts at the back, but certainly the ones that I've taken my kids to, then, they're of similar sorts of sites. So it's not to say we've not taken into account. But we can certainly address that moving forward and include that within our thinking and assessment far more clearly. The second one around the use of consultants. We did engage with disability groups first time out, and that was taken into account. But I think we reflect that there wasn't enough of it taken into account. So we certainly want to go a bit deeper on that one. And that's not to say there's still not more to be done locally. So to engage local disability user groups, for instance. But I think what we do need is some expertise, some expert knowledge to guide us, certainly from a starting point of view.
Councillor Denham.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here tonight and to see this report and the progress with it. To sign off the play plan 12 months ago was a major shift in focus for the City Council. And what officers have achieved in that time is really very impressive. And it does illustrate the huge amount of work in order to deliver any project, and absolutely there has been noticeable delivery within this 12 months. Give a name check to the mugger at Horizon, which has been a long time aspiration and is now fully functional, working with the young people. So I think, and I understand the need for the additional investment to give the officer resource. Officer time is the most precious resource that we have. The funding that they're presumably, will it be like a fixed term post? Because it's using, that's fine, because obviously it's using money from the Section 106. So I also kind of commend officers for identifying, and for our planning colleagues to flag that money towards play. And the social, environmental and economic implications, absolutely spot on. And it's worth saying that, that under the remit of health and well-being, young people's mental health, and with COVID lockdown, has been particularly challenging. So I think, the need is even greater than we had in the past. Just one other kind of query or comment. The the day-to-day maintenance of the play areas and looking at that, I don't see any mention of Diglis Fields, and there certainly has been a problem with that equipment there in the past, and I'm not seeing it mentioned as having been sorted or on a list to be sorted. I'm looking at my colleague. I haven't physically sort of been there recently. So some of the equipment that was there was not functioning, was taken away, and I haven't heard that it's been sorted. So if you could possibly kind of check on that, that would be helpful. Thank you. But yeah, well done to everybody involved.
Councillor Alcott.
Chair, thank you. Just to say, yeah, thank you. I fully, appreciate and would like to recommend the plan and approve it. I think just going back to Batten Hall Park and the pump track, I'm particularly pleased to see that on there. And also, it's good to see Corn Meadow on as well. So thank you.
Councillor Riaz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And my colleague mentioned regarding actually the, thanks goes to firstly to the Council in terms of our approach a number of years ago in terms of developing the play strategy, and in particular Councillor Norfolk in terms of leading on that work and for this report in conjunction with yourself coming here today. And it really does show that the work that we'd done a while ago in terms of identifying the lack of play spaces across the city, where the gaps were in terms of that, and produced a coherent strategy in terms of actually where resources were needed. I mean, don't forget here, there's £1 million of investment that we've identified that we are going to be delivering for the city in various areas of the city where it's needed most in terms of delivering play. That is a significant achievement for this council in order for us to follow up on a strategy, for us to appoint a children's ambassador champion, and previously Matt Lamb and now Kate Collier, a health and well-being committee. This is showing how the benefits of the committee system and cross-party working across the committees has identified the needs and how we are delivering in terms of in helping in all of those other areas. This is this is the beauty of the system that we're in, that we've realised what we can achieve in terms of that cross-party thinking and that joint thinking under a committee system. And it's great credit to see that actually the fruition of a plan, of a coherent plan that can be followed through, that can deliver for arguably the most neglected people in our cities, which are our young people. Our colleague highlighted earlier, Rob Collier from Bike Worcester highlighted earlier in terms of his children now doing GCSEs, or people that are working with the GCSEs before Batten Hall platform. In Horizon Mugger, it's taken me 10 years to get to this point. Those people that are identified, wanted a resurfacing of that mugger, are now at university or in jobs. You understand? This is the ridiculousness sometimes of the system that we live in, that once we identify a project, we can't see it following through until you face so many barriers that you come across in terms of delivery to be able to deliver that. And now those same people are coming back to me saying, at least financially, you've delivered it, you've realised it. Thank you so much. And the reduction in obviously youth services across the city, our young people are the focus. The BID have spoken about the importance of young people and how to tackle them, because they hang around in the city centre all day long causing trouble. That's because we haven't provided them the facilities, the youth facilities, the play facilities in order for them to do something else, just to make constructive use of their time. And this plan delivers on that promise to help young people and put them back on the agenda. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. Representing St John's Ward, obviously Cripplegate is a major issue for my ward, and I've recently had an officers' meeting to discuss some of the issues. There's major pieces of broken equipment that need replacing, removing, are dangerous. One which might be live whenever there's a flood, and the other one which is a zip wire that hasn't worked for about 10 years. So completely wasted space, literally. So I'm really pleased at the opportunity maybe of a pump track. and also maybe even an opportunity for a basketball area so that people can practice as they come out of the university buildings after watching a game. But Cripplegate is right on the edge of St John's, and the wider definition of St John's, most of the rest of west side of Worcester has very, very little play equipment. Now, it might change slightly with the bridge over to Gallivant, allowing some people to access play that direction. And it may be that once the proposals for Lerwick, Pitmaston come to fruition, there may be a little bit more. But at the moment, all the eggs effectively in the Cripplegate basket. And every time it floods, that means that there's no or very little play equipment. So I do think that although I very much welcome everything that's been put in place for Cripplegate, and that includes the changing places, toilets, the outdoor stage, everything like that, it's got to be spread wider, because at the moment there are lots of areas. Dines Green has got very little, no, St Clement's, which I don't represent, Dines Green I don't represent, Pitmaston I don't represent, but they're all really important areas and all having to focus in on that one park at the moment. So the sooner we can get a bit more spread out, a bit more sharing out, the better. Thank you.
Councillor Kimberley.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. I'm thinking back to a conversation I had with one of my residents going back a couple of months now, and then further correspondence that I had with one of the officers in discussion of the Cotswold Way plan. And one of the big barriers that I can see to the success of the project, and it would be lovely to have further conversation about this and, you know, work it into future iterations of the strategy as it develops. It is the limits of walking distance. I'm concerned that there are a lot of pedestrians, particularly, you know, elderly, disabled parents, grandparents, who are not as able to access some of the facilities and some of the proposed locations that we're looking at, because the walkability of some of that is limited by the lack of my favourite thing in the world, public benches. I'm sorry, you're going to get used to hearing me talk about benches a lot, but I would be interested in finding out if there is, you know, what consideration has been brought in the shaping of this plan to providing benches to link up some of these locations with the people that they share, the people that they serve, so that they sort of spread out their area of effectiveness a little bit further into the city. Thank you.
We've certainly looked at bench provision within respect of certain projects. Health and Wellbeing Committee have certainly raised the provision of additional benches, not just from a supporting play point of view, but from supporting people out going for a walk point of view, sort of a general use of the city. So we can continue to think about that, but probably need to think about it a bit more broadly than just here's a play area, does it need a bench? I think it probably links in as well. You know, it's a very similar theme to the active travel, isn't it? It's all part of that wider consideration. So we can certainly build that in.
Councillor Sarah.
Just wanted to make a point on following on from that one. I was in London a couple of days ago and just amazed at the Battersea Power Station development. I hadn't actually been to it before. But one of the key features, so many innovative benches they provided. They're great fun. You know, great circles and things that you could sit in, and you know, it doesn't have to be a piece of wood.
Okay, are we ready to move to a vote? I suggest that we take the 1.1 and 1.4 together as they are for noting, so that we note the annual update on progress and delivery of the Worcester Play Plan, and we note all the projects will be subject to local community engagement, as well as co-design with potential users of play spaces, with reports on feasibility, costings, and brought back to the committee for approval during the year. Okay?
Everyone happy to note?
Everyone happy to note? Yeah. Lovely. Okay, 1.2. We consider the preliminary appraisal for work on additional pump track location and provide the improves the progression of Purdeswell as the preferred location for a destination play site and based around a pump track. I see a show of hands for approval, please. Yeah, that's unanimous. Sorry? Yeah. And approves the list of priority projects for the next phase of delivery in the play plan up to March 2026 and the sources provisionally identified. Can I see a show of hands in support, please? That's unanimous again. And finally, 1.5 approves the allocation of the council's collected Section 106 and SIL funding as set out in this report to provide additional staff resources to support the delivery under the play plan. Can I see a show of hands in support, please? That's unanimous as well. That was easy. Right, now we move to Q1 performance report. And Shane, would you present this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is the regular report for this committee. Excuse me, just lost my page for a minute. It's pleasing to note that in terms of the projects, most are green. Just a little update on a couple of items. The first two, members will be aware that the Arches demolition work has now progressed to the point where there is blue sky where the chickens shat. So can we just pause to thank our head of property for his patience, perseverance and assiduity in bringing that to a conclusion by the deadline. And the other one, which is pleasing to note, is the retail unit property enhancements. We were waiting planning permission on the final scheme. That's now been granted, so that is progressing as well. One project which is in the red is the Towns Fund Community Skills element. We've talked about this a number of times at the committee, and we're conscious that that was delayed because we had to rethink some of the proposals once we understood what the costs of that will be. Those have been brought to a successful conclusion, and we're now, I believe, actually have let the procurement contract for those, so that's going ahead as well, and we just need to revise the timeline for the end of this calendar year for that one. And then in terms of the KPIs, there's only one showing in summary as red, but it's not actually red. The visitors to City Museums is about 20,000 more than the target, so I'm not sure why it's showing as red. In the text, it's showing as green, which is what it should be. So on the whole, the only other red one there is employment land completions, and that's because we don't have the final data for that at the moment. Otherwise, it's all as per the report. If there are any questions, there are colleagues around who should be able to answer those. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Stephen?
Thank you. I've got two questions. The first one is UK SPF People and Skills. Obviously very pleased to see this ongoing. I've got a question about, obviously within the skills and training, are there any plans or is there any provision for upskilling in the sort of green economy with things like, for example, insulating homes or some things like this to help to grow the green economy? That's the first question.
Yes, we have procured a contract and we will be delivering with an organisation called OSAP Limited. They are doing a range of things as far as green skills are concerned. They are working with businesses to identify whether the business can green itself, so looking at how the business runs and how they deliver their activities. But they're also working with, to deliver level 2 and level 3 qualifications in domestic retrofit, carbon awareness and energy management, preventing plastic pollution and sustainable resource management, alongside a level 3 and a level 4 in sustainable recycling activities. So there's quite a range of delivery that they're offering there. They're quite a flexible organisation, and they have said if they're working with businesses and they identify a demand for a certain level of skills in a particular area, they can respond and will put additional training on within their contract. So that will be running now up until March next year.
Great, thank you. And my second question, there's an item there, City Centre Transport Action Plan. It's quite a brief, short sentence there. Draft action plan will go to committee in November for approval. Could you just sort of expand on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, it's in relation to the action plan is part of the City Centre Transport Plan, which is actually a county council plan, really. But this is how we can influence it with some of the projects that we'd like to see, that we can try and encourage the county council to be part of. But there are some in there that we may be able to deliver ourselves. So there will be active travel routes that we will look at, and we will encourage the county council to deliver, or we will look at options for delivering it ourselves. We will look at EV charging, our car park structures. There'll be a range of items within that action plan. We will consult with people at the moment to see if we've got the right projects, and then in November we will present back what we think we can achieve and what we think we need to do to get the county council to deliver on some of those outputs.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you very much. Sorry, there's quite a lot here, isn't there? And I haven't seen these before necessarily. The economic development strategy, it says it's under discussion alongside a... With whom is the economic development strategy under discussion as to, you know, what's the process and who's involved with that? I've got some other questions, but probably best to take them one by one.
That will be, we are working with myself and David Blake will be looking at working with yourself as the leader to identify what your priorities are as far as economic development is concerned, and to review the city plan so that we can identify if we've achieved certain things and if we need to change what our priorities are for the future. So it will be a conversation with councillors to identify where we think we need to take our economic development delivery.
Okay, because I don't think that discussion has started yet, if you think you're talking to me. We obviously need to take that forward outside of this process. But I think, you know, it should be more than the leader, and it should be more than members. You know, economic development is really, really important priority for this council and for this administration. So I think, yeah, we need to have... start the discussion and have further discussion about it then. Thank you. The delivery of housing figures against targets, and I've lost the page now. Oh, here we go. So page 47 is number of market dwellings granted and number of affordable dwellings granted, and I wondered two questions within those figures and within the definitions. Do HMOs count in any fashion, and what are they? And the other is around permitted development. Is there any ability to track or understand what homes that are appearing via permitted development?
Through you, Chair, it's difficult to monitor what's being delivered through permitted development. That's just the nature of what it is, obviously. But the measures that you referred to are something that we're discussing at the moment with the chair of this committee, Councillor Norfolk, to try and make those a little bit more meaningful than they are at the moment. It's something that I've been discussing with my planning policy colleagues, because it's a lot more challenging than we might imagine at first glance. The first challenge is to identify which particular target that we're measuring housing delivery against. And you might have also picked up from this quarterly performance report that in previous years we've monitored housing delivery on a South Worcestershire basis, but as a result of certain appeal decisions, the Planning Inspectorate has directed us towards monitoring housing supply on an individual local planning authority basis. So that throws at least one spanner in the works, but we hope to have something more meaningful to present to you by the next meeting of this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions? Okay, are we happy to note the contents of this report?
Noted.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, we move now to the Museums Worcestershire Annual Review. Just to say, this has already been through Joint Museums Committee. And Philip will present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So many of you know me already, Philippa from the Museum Service, but for any new councillors, it's a great opportunity for me to take this opportunity to use the annual report to introduce the museums a little bit to you. We've been museums, we have two museums here in Worcester. One of them goes back to the grand old age of 1833. We're the 8th oldest museum in the country here in Worcester, so something to be very much proud of. We've been a joint museums committee since, joint museum, beg your pardon, service since 2010. We have a joint service now that runs both the city museums and the county museums together. And since 2010, we've been in a position where we've managed to halve our budget and raise our satisfaction levels by 25%. So I think we're in a very good position to move forward. Putting together an annual review is something that's a required part of the joint agreements, and the Joint Museums Committee has reviewed this and approved it and asked for it to be brought to PED, which is the overviewing committee for the Joint Museums Committee here at the City. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of a background, which I think coming fairly soon after Sam from the bid is quite an interesting juxtaposition actually, and then I'm going to just give you some of the very highlights from the report, and then we can obviously ask any questions that would come on from there. There is no doubt about it that cultural destinations are becoming more and more important in town centres. It's not that surprising. Retail is very different to how we were maybe, say, 20 years ago. And cultural destinations are becoming really quite central within that offer. We are here in Worcester, we are at about 90% of where we were footfall in 2019 before COVID, but we're absolutely performing better than the national picture, where footfall is down a bigger amount. So there's no doubt about it. All of those things that Sam talked about earlier today for the bid on the retail side of things, but also for us on the cultural side of things, working together is what makes the city successful. The people that come to visit the museums bring with them significant amounts of spend to the rest of the city. So as they come together, they bring, they spend money on parking, they spend money on coffee, they spend money on accommodation, they spend money on going out for the evening. And there's no doubt about it that that is part of the success of the city. We use a methodology that's now adopted across museums, which is a relatively straightforward basis. We work out how many percentage of our visitors have come from a close distance, a further away distance, and a much further away distance, and then we are able to work on working on an average of a fairly modest spend for each of those distances as to what that comes to on secondary spend within the city. And for the museums, it comes to more than 3 million. So those visitors that are coming to museums spending a bit of money with us, but then they're spending 3 million with the rest of the businesses in the city. We have seen quite a different change, I would say, since the COVID challenges. I think this is the first year where we've really seen that we're moving into an international tourist market again. And that's challenging for Worcestershire, actually, because we're not on the main tourist runs. So while we've seen things like Windsor Castle have massively increased their visitors, Stratford Shakespeare Birthplace Museum has massively increased their visitors, a lot of other West Midlands areas have not, and that is a challenge for Worcestershire without a doubt. We can see within the individual figures that the ALVA, which is the Association of Large Tourist Destinations, we can see that the ones that have been particularly successful, and within Worcestershire, it's only really Croom that has managed to maintain a significant increase, whereas a lot of the other areas have kind of plateaued, I would say, compared to where we were in 2019. So I'm pleased to say that we're on the side of also increasing in the museums, Worcestershire museums, that we are managing to both maintain our increased income targets, but also our increased visitor footfall, which is a challenge to do both, frankly. So I'm very pleased that we're in a position that we're able to do that. So I'm going to take you through the highlights of the report itself, and then we can come back to questions at the end of that. So the report itself starts on page 59, looks like this, the page. So I'm just going to take you through the very, very kind of top line parts as we go through. So we have the 3 museums across Worcestershire, 2 in Worcester, 1 in Hartlebury Castle in the north of the county. The total visits for all of those museums is 113,000, which is a 12% increase on the previous year. And we've also, alongside that, seen visitor satisfaction go up. And we also measure this improvement in visitor well-being. We do this by, from time to time, we do periodic surveys where we ask people when they come in, 5 measures of their kind of mental happiness state of mind, and then when they leave, we ask them the same questions, and we can do then some analysis as to how their mental state has improved over that period that they've been with us. And we've seen that 20% improvement in those on average across. It varies on what sort of thing that people are coming and participating in, but I think that's an important part of what we do, as well as the very kind of economic side of things. A lot of the questions I often get when I talk about the number of people that come and the economic impact of the city is that people say, well, not everybody's coming just for the museums, are they? They're coming, you know, just because they happen to be here with their friends, and it's something that they do when they're part of it. And that is absolutely true. We are very much a social visit. It's something that you come with friends and family. Our average visitor group size is about 2.5, so people come with friends or family. But on our surveys, we know that 39% of visitors are coming into Worcestershire specifically to visit the museum. So that's bringing in really quite a lot. And I've shown in there that if we take that against the Commandery visitors only, so not against everybody, but just against the Commandery visitors, that means 1,700 beds at paid accommodation in the city come specifically from people coming to visit the Commandery. Which brings me a little bit some of those highlights about the Commandery. Actually, Sam talked about it earlier about the international or the national marketing campaign that we did together. We worked with the BID and with Visit Worcestershire and with Visit Worcester in order to together use our funds to try and bring people to experience the heritage in Worcester. Working together absolutely means that money goes further. It's very, very difficult to reach a national audience. It's very, very expensive to reach a national audience. So if we work together and coordinate it, it means we can absolutely push that up together. And at the Commandery, we saw a 22% increase in the summer visitors immediately following that marketing campaign. So it does show that marketing really does work. I mean, there is never enough money to do it all the time, but those boosts that we can do when we are able to find the funding for it is absolutely worthwhile. And we were also very pleased that this year the Commandery was awarded Visit England's Gold Award as a visitor attraction. There are very few of these across the country, and it shows that you've really made massive improvement for visitors. It shows that we've been able to really respond to everything that visitors have given us, all the feedback given us, to show that we are absolutely achieving what visitors would want as a high quality visitor attraction. The Museum and Art Gallery has been a really interesting year all round. It's the first year that we did a paid for exhibition, and it's also, we then did a really great exhibition last autumn, working in collaboration with Worcester Paint Festival. And they were 2 very, very different exhibitions with very different audiences, and they taught us a lot, actually, both of them in different ways. I'm very happy to go into that in more detail if it would be useful with members. I think I might allow you to ask me some questions back, if that's probably the most sensible way. But they were both enabled us to bring in very different audiences to the Art Gallery. And I think that this is the future way forward for the Art Gallery, is to look at how we can serve those very different audiences alongside each other across the year. I'm going to pass over our information about Hartlebury Castle. I'm very happy to talk about it, but obviously we're here, we're concentrating on the city. All of these work that we've done, we've really tried to work quite closely with community groups, and we now have some very good relationships with several community groups that work specifically on various different projects across the year. The Paint Festival and Paint the Streets exhibition were a great opportunity to work with several community groups, and really this is where you're talking about using what it is that you do to reach a very small number of people but make a significant difference in their lives. So for example, we worked just with 14 people, young people in Warndon, who on a mural, but that's a fantastic intervention in their lives that can really make a difference. And in the same way, when we work with the holiday activity and food programme, so this is funded by the County Council, or nationally funded through the County Council, really to specifically work with children that are eligible for free school meals, to try and find ways that they can continue to be happy, healthy, engaged over those holiday periods. And we found that that's really working with our very local audiences, and we make a significant difference in their enjoyment of those days over those holiday periods. On page 68, there's a lovely picture of a group of care leavers inside the basement store at the Museum and Art Gallery, where we keep the art collection, the city's art collection. And this is a great story of where we're working with a group of young people who don't normally come to museums, who don't see museums as being something that is for them, and really showing them that actually, yes, it can be for them. This is a lovely group here who were looking at specific paintings and talking about what they meant to them and how they were interested in what it was that they were seeing in these paintings. And we had some fantastic conversations that came out of that are going to be represented in our new redisplay of the Museum of the Story of Worcester Gallery, the gallery that talks about Worcester's stories. And I think that's, even if they don't see it as their gallery, they are absolutely part of the story of Worcester, and I think that's fantastic that we are able to represent their stories within it. Moving on to page 69 tells you a little bit our museum volunteers. We really now rely considerably on volunteers. We have 47 that work across various different parts of the service, and between them all they gave over 3,500 hours this year, which is a significant donation to us in time. Really, they enable us to achieve things that we just wouldn't be able to do without their additional help. But actually, since COVID, we've also shown that it's not just about what volunteers do for us, it's also about what we do for what we do for volunteers. The time that they spend with us is often very social, enables them those that really struggle with loneliness at other times, to have that meaning and enjoyment in their life is great. And the fact that they are able to choose what it is that they do with us, whether it's very practical things, say working in the Commandery Gardens, or whether it's quite intellectual things, researching some of our collections, is a really an interesting way that we can work with our communities as they need us, really, particularly those who are just moving into the work period and those who are retiring and finding something to do with themselves at that point. There's a little bit in here about museum collections and what it is that we are acquiring. As I mentioned before, we've been collecting since 1833 in the city, so we are not acquiring large numbers of things. We are probably offered over 200 items a year from local people, and we are now extremely targeted in what it is that we collect in order to just fill gaps within the collections. Often that does mean things that are particularly high value, those things that people haven't given us in the past. So raising the funds to do that is very much part of that job. There's a little bit here about learning. We've really seen a renaissance in learning since the COVID period. There's no doubt about it that teachers have really, I think, appreciated that time out of the classroom since the COVID time. And we've seen this particular year, we've seen school visits increase 27% on last year, and our outreach boxes are also extremely popular. And then the page 72 gives you a thing that we worked in, a project that we worked in partnership with a school network locally, where we worked specifically with one painting from the city's collection, a particularly beloved painting, to really start to talk with schools to get ideas about how they could be their creative in themselves. And we were able to then put their own artworks in display in the art gallery in response to that, which was lovely for them to be able to see that they were also then exhibitable within an art gallery. Alongside the museum, we have a registered charity that we set up now 3 years ago with the support of a particularly generous philanthropist within the city. And his leadership has brought a second donation to us this year, actually from a donor who lives in New York, but who grew up in Worcester. I think there's something quite interesting that there's obviously a Worcester diaspora out there who are interested in supporting their own memories of the city. His funding is going to go towards the development of a gallery that specifically tells the story of the Worcester glove history. It was an incredibly important part of the history of this city. At one point, I think it was something like 1 in 5 residents in Worcester were employed in that particular industry. Almost completely disappeared from our landscape now, and so something that's very important that we tell. I think I say this a lot, but I think it's important that we remember that, say 50 years ago, even 100 years ago, if you were a working class people grown up in Worcester, starting a creative job was considered absolutely normal. Your parents would support you to go into a creative job. Whereas now we're in a position where it's seen as quite an elite thing to be able to do, and something where it's not really encouraged to take on to a further degree, because it's harder to be able to get a job in it. And I think we've got real inspiration that we can give to young people in Worcester by saying, no, actually, there are jobs within that creative industry. Look back to the inspiration of what went before you. And then finally, a little bit here about the museum membership scheme. It's an important donation structure that comes into the museums, and they fund a lot of things that we aren't able to fund otherwise. And we're very pleased that we've had a massive increase in the members that have joined us this year. So it's something that's growing and growing. I think particularly as we start charging for exhibitions, it becomes important. And then finally, looking forward, we talk about some of the big projects that we've got on the horizon. Some of those appear in the review that we've just had about performance. We have a significant new display for the Worcestershire Soldier at the Commandery, and behind it, in the space that we currently have in the Art Gallery and Museum that has the Worcestershire Soldier display, we will have a new permanent art gallery to show the city's art collection for the first time. That will also include the glove collections, the glove gallery that we've talked about as being supported by our donor. And then the final page has really quite a lot of the external funders that we have to thank this year. For us, using the City Council's core funding to lever in additional funding makes things happen, and that's very much part of what it is that we do. Okay, can I answer any questions?
Councillor Scott.
Thank you very much. Thanks for a very full report. 3 little questions for you, please. First of all, on the visitor numbers, I couldn't find a figure specifically for the Commandery. Do I take it that of the 114 thousand total visitors, 24 at Hartlebury and 74 in the Worcester City Art Gallery and Museum, leaving about 20,000?
That's about right. I can look it up very, very exactly if you'd like me to, if you just give me a second.
And that's rising, is it?
The Commandery is more plateaued than the other two, which is perhaps why I haven't celebrated it as much. The Commandery this last year had in total 15,129 visitors, which was almost exactly the same last year. But if you compare that to where we were pre-COVID, we were on 13,285 visitors at that point. So we've increased it in that post-COVID period. It is the lowest visited of all of our museums. I think the most important thing to say about the Commandery is that what I think is important is the diversity of visitors that we have. It's an incredibly important Civil War site, but there is no point in pretending that every visitor to Worcester is interested in the Civil War history. That's very much a kind of, you know... Exactly. No, it's a really important visitor number, but it's a subset, and I think the important thing is that the diversity of visitors that come is what's important. So since we've had in that post-COVID period, we've really started to up, say, our Halloween offer, which brings in an awful lot younger people to the museum, which is great. We now have an escape room, which brings in an additional audience that don't come to the normal, kind of the traditional part of the museum. We just currently have Worcester Theatres doing the Theatre in the Garden. All of these are what makes the museum a vibrant space.
My other 2 questions were, what is your relationship like with the Tudor House Museum? Do you support them with collections? Any comment on that little voluntary run project along Friar Street? And I didn't hear any commentary on the state of the existing collection. You talk about how you would be adding to the collection, but would you like to give just a quick summary of what the state of Worcestershire's collection is? And I know it's often a matter of concern to museums, and either you've got lots of things you don't know about or you've exhausted all the possibilities in it.
Okay, so Tudor House, first of all. Tudor House is a fantastic volunteer-run museum, no doubt about it. They do great work. We share some staff and some volunteers with them. We have I would describe it as a kind of an advisory network role across the city, which is Worcester Heritage Partnership, which gives that opportunity to support the smaller independent voluntary-run museums. There's more than obviously Tudor House across the city. It's important they stand on their own feet. They wouldn't thank me for being the ones that tell them how to do things by any means, but we are there to give them advice and support when they need it. And there have been times over the past few years when that's particularly needed, and times when, frankly, they do a fantastic job that they don't need us at all. So, the existing collection. So, the Worcester City collection is somewhere in the region of 1 million objects. I mean, if we're talking about having acquired it since 1833, you can imagine it's a lot. It covers natural history, archaeology, social history, art. There are some incredibly important pieces within that. There are some pieces that really we keep because they are important record of things, but actually you would probably not want to see on a day-to-day basis. The balance in museums is always to be able to rotate the displays, to continue to make people, interest people, include people, make sure that it's something that everybody can engage with, but still keep those core reserve collections for research value long going. So, I mean, a considerable number of those 1 million are pieces of archaeology from various different developments. I don't think anybody around the table would thank me if we put on a display entirely of potsherds, but there will be people out there who were absolutely fascinated about that, and so it's really important that those are there in the reserve collections for research ongoing. If we talk about the natural history collections, for example, some of them are incredibly fragile and so therefore don't come out on display very often, but we have lots of examples of flora that is now extinct in Worcestershire. It's not been found in Worcester anymore, and we can track that evidence through the collections. We also have, we have a baby polar bear, we have an emperor penguin. These are things that, we have an albatross on display. These are things that actually, you can see them on the telly, but there is something very majestic about seeing it in real life that really enables you to learn something different about the natural world around you by being able to stand next to it and realise actually how tall you are compared to a penguin, that kind of thing. That is quite an interesting thing to say. Does that give you a bit of a background?
Councillor Pingree.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Philippa, for this report. It's really, really detailed and I'm really impressed. I did have 2 questions, but in your summing up of the report, you've managed to answer one of them really well, which I was going to ask about how you encourage people from outside of Worcestershire to come in. And, it's really fantastic to see that the Commandery is getting that national recognition. So I guess I could expand on it saying, what have you got planned in the future to keep that going and encourage people to our art gallery as well? And the other question I had is, we've spoken a lot in this meeting about young people, so particularly older children and, sort of people in their 20s, I guess, and how important it is, for their lives and for keeping talent and expertise in Worcester and for reducing antisocial behaviour, that they have things to do. So my question is, what do you have planned, or what do you do to attract young people to these museums?
You were kind enough to give me a suggestion that you might ask me this question, so I've been able to look up a little bit of stats for you. About 10% of our visitors come through formal education, so and I think that's a very important part of what we do, is that children come to visit museums and learn as part of their visit. It's very normal across the museum world is that you then tend to lose them and they come back when they have their own children. So we know that it's attracting that age between about 16 and 24 is probably the hardest task altogether. That's not to say we don't try. So we do some regular researches in order to really get under the skin a little bit more evidence as to exactly what it is that our visitors are coming from, where they're coming from, what their motivation is. And I've looked that up in order to be able to answer this. So in 1819, when we did the previous survey here, if we look at the average of those visitors that were 16 to 24, 3% of them at the Art Gallery, of the entire visitors, 3% were 16 to 24, and 1% of our visitors were 16 to 24 at the Commandery. So post-COVID, we've managed to really turn that around, I would say. We're up 2%, 5% of visitors now at the Art Gallery Museum are in that age range, 16 to 24, and 11% at the Commandery. And that's absolutely down to those things like more excitement over Halloween, escape rooms, all of those things that enable those additional things to come in. I do think we've also, that generation are in a different position to previous generations of 16 to 24-year-olds. That 16 to 24-year-olds now are the first generation really that were born digital. And for them, the power of the real object actually becomes more so. It's a generation that actually likes collecting vinyl, likes reading real books. We have that opportunity to reach out to them now, I think, in a way that we probably haven't had with previous generations. Paint the Streets is a great example. So this was the exhibition that we did last autumn in the Art Gallery. We essentially doubled our normal visitors between 16 and 24, up to 10% of our visitors to Paint the Streets were 24 and under. And we moved from our usual 97% of visitors who are white to 80% of visitors who are ethnically white. So, you know, it really became a significantly more diverse audience than we'd had for previous exhibitions. And about 50% of those were from Worcester, 20% were from nationally from the whole country, and 2% actually were international coming to that exhibition. There's a challenge, though, on the other side of that, which is those are the audiences that have less to spend. And we have, over the last 10, 15 years, we have set a trend of we need to reduce the council subsidy for museums and increase their earned income. And so for us, that means that we have had to make some tough choices as we go through, and it absolutely is a balance between making sure that we can fund the full range of exhibitions for that diverse audience from potentially a smaller number of those exhibitions that are able to make a surplus. So it is an absolute challenge as we go through. So a great example is the one we've had just recently, which was an exhibition of Dame Laura Knight's work. So we had only about 19% of those visitors came from Worcester. So we were absolutely bringing in that national audience coming to that exhibition, and with them their spend into that exhibition. And because of that, we've then been able to fund our summer exhibition, which has just started, which is of dinosaurs, which absolutely will attract that family audience of local visitors. So it's that balance of making it work across the year, which is the challenge. We have, please do come and see the dinosaur exhibition over the summer. It is an absolutely fabulous exhibition. And we're following it in the autumn with an exhibition that specifically leads on to those conversations that we've been having with people about what they'd like to see. So it talks about the art collection specifically chosen by members of our local communities. And then after that, we have an exhibition called Achin Tan, which is specifically about Gypsy Roma traveller communities, which have been seen very differently from times of, say, the 18th century when Gainsborough was painting them, and we've got paintings from the Tate that are coming that gives that historical background, to some of the contemporary artists in that community that are working now. Obviously, the GRT community is a significant ethnic minority within Worcestershire, and their creativity has a lot to teach us all, I think.
Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the Laura Knight exhibition, which I was privileged to go and see. It was absolutely stupendous. I think one of the nicest things about that, and also previously the Titanic exhibition, was you managed to bring out local links, and I think that's a very powerful thing to do. The only other thing I wanted to note was you had this amazing 80s exhibition that went into the evening, and I don't think we've had one since then. Are there more evening exhibitions or events planned? Because I would think that might generate some money as well as fun.
We've actually got some planned alongside dinosaurs. It's going to be interesting to see whether the same audience that came to enjoy you know, a DJ in amongst the 80s exhibition will enjoy it also in amongst the dinosaurs. But I hope it might well do. And you will be very pleased to know that next summer we have an exhibition of 1990s following on from the 80s because it was such a popular exhibition.
Councillor Riaz, I look forward to seeing you in a shell suit. I'd like to thank you for this report, Philippa, and all your hard work and the museum's team. I'd like to note that I'm really pleased to see, I often shop in the museum shop because it's in my ward, and I'm so pleased that it's plastic free, and I recognise the hard work over time that's gone into that. So thank you very much. Okay, are we ready to move on to... The City Museum is in Arboretum Ward. Yeah. It is. Okay, are we ready to move to a vote to note this report? Lovely, thank you. We're going to have a 5-minute comfort break before we move on to the other items. Thank you. Thank you. Right, now we're at the Shrub Hill Quarter SPD. Kevin, would you present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, lots of new faces since I last came to PED, although I have met everyone. But just by way of formal introduction, I'm Kevin Moore. I'm Head of Property and Asset Management. But the reason I'm presenting this report, and what after all is a planning document, is because I'm the City Council's lead on what we're doing at Shrub Hill, the regeneration of what we now refer to as the Shrub Hill Quarter, where we're working with the County Council and a number of other key stakeholders to bring forward the regeneration of what is a 14 hectare area from the station, taken in the former St Modwyn's industrial estate down to the canal, and also includes 2 large tracts of land in the shape of the retail park and the bus garage. As you'll know, has been picked out in the development plan and the city centre master plan as what's referred to as an opportunity zone, but we've narrowed down the designation as the Shrub Hill Quarter. So this committee back in the end of January approved the draft supplementary planning document for statutory consultation. As there are some new faces around the table, just to rehearse very briefly why the supplementary planning document. See, it sits below the development plan in kind of looking at an area in a more detailed manner in terms of setting a framework for the future development of that area. We've been keen to use the document to set out those areas key buildings that we'd like to protect. There's a lot of heritage in the area, some key movement corridors that again we'd like to protect and make sure that they're not impinged upon in any future development that comes forward. So it sets a context for any landowners' plans and the way that they'll be considered when they are put forward for planning consent in due course as a context, a more detailed context for considering those. We also felt it's an important thing to use as a promotional tool for what we're doing at Shrub Hill. It's a key piece in persuading developer interest. The County Council are just about to start off a procurement for a master developer, and it's a key piece of evidence to show that how the 2 local authorities in the area are working together and are, have a coherent plan and strategy for what they'd like to see here. But it's not something that's just been put together by 2 local authorities. It's something that has truly been built upon through public consultation with key stakeholders and also the landowners in that area. So this committee approved the draft document for consultation in January. That went through the statutory consultation process, which involved public display of plans here at the Guildhall, a number of online sessions that were held with key stakeholders and landowners and their representatives. We held a dedicated session, an all-member session as well, to take them through the plans as well. And I know some of you took the opportunity to come out to site as well for a guided tour on site. So those sessions were attended by the likes of the Civic Society, Bike Worcester, Canals and River Trust, Network Rail, and other members from the rail industry. And all in all, 59 people, organisation, bodies made representation through the website that we set up for that process. And it's fair to say that the vast majority of those representations were very supportive of what was in the document and what we've been trying to achieve. And within the report is something called a statement of community consultation, which takes you through the main themes the representations that were made on the draft, and the response that we've made, how we've responded to those. Some of those have been noted. Some of those it hasn't been appropriate to actually take any further forward in the SPD, but there have been some changes to the SPD to take account of that, but nothing in a significant or material way. In fact, the thing that I would pick out this evening to talk about is really a point of clarification, in that the single in quotes objection we received to the draft was on behalf of the owners of Elgar House. In the draft SPD, we kind of reserved our position. Well, we set out a clear aspiration that we'd all like to see the back of Elgar House, but there was an element of pragmatism in terms of drilling down to the delivery of plans in front of the station and that whole area in front of the station. We were honest enough to show the retention of Elgar House. We've met with the owner's agents on Elgar House to take this a little further forward. Their objection picked up on the apparent contradiction in what we were saying in one part of the SPD, accepting that in the absence of any serious ability by the local authorities to mount a bid for external funding, or even from our own funds or through external sources, to put together a bid to not just acquire Elgar House, but demolish it and then set out the whole area's public realm, that Elgar House was likely to say, but very clearly signalling that the owners there own Elgar House and a plot opposite, on which stands a vacant single-storey building. So what we've done in the SPD is to show in the various plans and illustrations that whilst Elgar House remains, we are signalling a very clear intention by the local authorities to acquire that vacant plot and to set that out as new public realm as the approach to the station, because we firmly believe that at the very least is something that is deliverable within the scope of funding that's achievable by the local authorities, and principally that would be a county council bid through the local transport fund, and has become one of their key priorities. That's really the main change if you were to compare the two documents on a page-by-page basis. It's just addressing that where we illustrate and show kind of aspirational images of the regeneration, that we're honest enough to show Elgar House, albeit that we are expecting through this document and through the discussions that will continue with the owners, that if they bring forward, well, they do have an intention to bring forward plans for Elgar House, but very clearly we are looking for those to address things like the appearance of Elgar House, the change of more active uses, particularly on the ground floor, and the way the whole building relates to what else is around it in terms of the approaches and accesses. So the revised document is obviously recommended this evening for approval, and it will be for PED to, if it decides to accept that, to recommend to full council in September that the document is adopted and becomes part of the local development framework. Just got one tiny correction to make to the report. At the end of the report, there's a couple of paragraphs as an update on some key work streams that are going on at the moment, which are being funded by Towns Fund. There's principally the refurbishment of Isaac Maddox House to provide new employment space, and the new piece of public realm, which provides that missing link of a footway from the canal to Pheasant Street. Both of those are well underway and have all the consents in place, and delivery will be done by the Towns Fund deadline. The corrections just that I've mentioned, the deadline has been March 2025. It's actually, won't be that quick, I'm afraid. It's actually March 2026. But I'm fully confident that both these schemes will be completed by then. Thank you.
Just to clarify, that's 6.1, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, please? Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I went on one of the visits that you mentioned, which was really interesting. Are there more visits going to be offered to councillors? Because I think there'll be new members that wouldn't have had that chance before.
Yeah, I'm very happy to arrange that. Yeah.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. In broad principle, I'm very supportive of this. I think it's an excellent way of moving forward to that part of the city, although I do have concerns that it may draw people away from the high street, and that we need to be careful how we manage that. My main problem is that when I went to the public exhibition, the images that were shown didn't include the Sheriff Street development behind, which is massive and completely swamps the beautiful station. What is proposed in the version I remember seeing is quite tall buildings in front of the station. Now, we've already got Elgar House, which most people in the city hate. I'd hate to think that we're now putting up more high buildings that would obstruct the view to the station and across the city. So I'm a bit worried that we might be planning to build a bit too high, and maybe slightly smaller buildings would be more appropriate to that space.
Okay, take the 2 points. The first point in terms of what this might pose as a threat to the high street. Obviously, we've been very clear that there is absolutely no retail element within the Shrub Hill quarter, unless it's kind of a local shop to serve kind of new housing or offices and other things that are built. But absolutely, there's no retail. There's no what you might call large box leisure. You know, there's not a cinema. You know, things like a cinema proposal, bowling alley, anything like that is not proposed or welcomed.
That's already in proposal for Sheriff Street, though, isn't it? So
for Sheriff, I know that was one of the ideas for Sheriff Gate, how far that is in terms of becoming reality, but certainly not for, in terms of the SPD. The SPD does not go so far as to include Sheriff Gate within the area. So, you know, we can look after this area, the other side of the tracks from Sheriff Gate, and make sure that there's nothing there that becomes a threat to the vitality of the high street. The second point is we've put a lot of work into how, you know, protection of view corridors, you know, protecting the views to kind of spires and other key facades in the city centre are protected, and that also works back to the view back up to the station. So I can assure you that those have been carefully thought through, and the kind of the height and massing of the development that potentially is allowed for in this does not get in the way of obscuring the views of the station, principally because of the difference in levels. Yeah.
Kevin, I wonder if you would be able to share the webinar with Councillor Barnes, please, because they talk really nicely about the sightlines.
I can do that. I think if I sort of work through some dates for another site visit, I think when that goes out, we'll set up a link to the recording of those seminars. Yeah.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. I did, before I was elected as a councillor, I was invited to take part in one of the consultations, I think, because I used to be secretary of the Worcester Canal Group a long time ago. That might have been the reason. Anyway, I looked very hard at the SPD and I thought it's an excellent document, and I can assure Councillor Barnes the views and the issues about physical aspects of it are very well organised and set out. But providing the right sorts of buildings in the right sort of place is only part of the story of the role of this area. And I really just want to, I'm sorry, as a new, a stand-in, a sub on this committee, not a regular place, I would urge the committee to take really seriously the point about the economic development strategy which Councillor Denham referred to earlier, and the opportunity that Isaac Maddock House and a revited engine house give with public ownership of those are really enormous to really drive for the right sort of enterprise and employment which could be created there. And looking at things like industrial clusters, look at the areas of the broader economy which are really underrepresented in Worcester, really gives us one of the few opportunities we've got to fulfil some of the floor space needs of those areas, and to go further to work with new businesses to create it. So a message for the committee, I think. And the other thing which is physically the big gap, and it's an example of how planning perhaps wasn't done as well as it is being done now, was when the Asda was built in St Martin's Gate development. The back door of Asda, which is the main route into the city centre, is absolutely appalling bit of urban planning, and overcoming that is something which serious attention has got to be given to allow not only this thing to contribute to the city centre, but feel a part of it. At the moment, it just feels detached, and we need to really work on that movement. Thank you.
Can I just respond to a couple of those? Yeah, thank you. You're dead right about the whole economic development strategy for the area, and that's something that has been taken up by the steering committee, being the joint steering committee for Shrub Hill, which comprises of members on our side and the county council side, and that obviously perhaps it should feature, perhaps it doesn't. Obviously the SPD been more of a placemaking document, but the councils will continue to work on the economic development strategy for the area, building on the vision that's already been agreed from them, and there's been some studies, and that's probably something we'll take back to committee going forward. The other piece about, what we want to make sure is that this route from the station down Cromwell Street, across the canal, across the bit that we're going to do to Pheasant Street, doesn't stop there, that there is an element of Towns Fund grants that does enable us to do something to that that passageway through the multi-storey car park. So we have had conversations with Asda, and it's time to sort of bring a proposal back to Asda in terms of what we think we can do to that to make it, how should we say, far more inviting, and that you want to continue your journey into St Martin's Quarter.
I'd like to echo Councillor De Serra's comments about the tour. It really was fantastic, wasn't it? And it really, I would recommend, if there's another opportunity, that all members do take up that experience. Right, are we ready to vote? So we are noting the outcome of the statutory consultation, and then 1.2 is recommending the council adopts the Shrub Hill Quarter supplementary planning document. Can I see a show of hands in favour, please? That's unanimous, thank you. Right. No, you've been so patient. We're on to pavement licensing now. Would you present, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure it's the report you've all been waiting for. So this is the pavement licence today to consider the update to the Business and Planning Act, which makes the pavement licensing regime permanent under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. You've also been asked to consider and approve the draft pavement licensing policy for the purposes of consultation. Carry on, lovely. So a bit of background to this report. So back in July 2020, the Business and Planning Act was enacted. Well, of course, it was rushed through Parliament at the time, and this was to assist the economic recovery and growth of the country as we came out of the various restrictions which were placed on us during COVID. Now, Part 1 of that Act introduced provisions within England and Wales, which put in place a more streamlined process to enable businesses to obtain permissions to place removable furniture on the highway, so namely tables and chairs. This was for use in connection with the sale and consumption of food and drinks, so it was for hospitality businesses. It was to assist those businesses who were being seriously affected by the pandemic, so no doubt everyone remembers social distancing and in particular on licensed premises. So the outside area was very important. At the time, this responsibility was given to local authorities, and as the legislation was put in place quickly, it left little time for us to put in place policies and procedures for dealing with applications. Now, at that time, WRS took on the responsibility on behalf of the council, as they were best placed to do so because they're already dealing with Licensing Act applications, and Worcester uniquely had its own scheme, the street amenity for placing tables and chairs on the high street. So we're well versed with dealing with those sorts of applications. Officers worked quickly and put in place policies and application forms, templates, website content, and this enabled businesses to apply for pavement licences as soon as possible. Now, these provisions were only intended to be for a temporary basis. I think it was 6 months initially, but it was extended and extended until it was finally made permanent early this year in March. This was by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. It was introduced pretty much without any warning, and it was made permanent, which is why we're almost playing catch up at the moment, and this report's coming to committee now. Now that it's been made permanent, it's necessary to review the council's policy, which is what we've done. We've redrafted it in line with the guidance, and it's been presented today to members for approval to go out to consultation. It's based on a template that we've produced across all 6 district councils with slight changes for different councils and their needs. Now, prior to publishing for tonight's papers, we made some amendments in relation to barriers, which is in you'll see it on page 259, which is to assist those people who are visually impaired, so that any barriers that are used, well, we're actually stating that they must be used with pavement licences so that they are easily identifiable to anybody with visual impairments or completely blind. The policy itself provides background to the licensing regime. It also provides assistance in understanding the key terms of the legislation. And it also goes on to explain how people can apply for licences, how they're to be advertised, how they are consulted on, and then finally how they're determined by the council. Before actually adopting or publishing any policy, it's considered best practice to consult on that policy with those that it affects. So this will be key stakeholders such as existing businesses, ward members, district councils, and the like. So that's pretty much the report for you, members. We have the draft policy attached to the report, and we're asking for your authority to go out to consultation and then bring it back to a later committee for consideration before approval and publication. Happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Niall. Before I take questions, I'd really like to credit Councillor Norfolk for the barriers, which happened after the site concern visit. That was very much her suggestion, so I'd like to credit her for that. Okay, questions or comments, please? Councillor Pingree.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It's really good. Just looking at these pavement licences, what can be done to prevent goals from, obviously when you're serving food outside, it's something you'll always have to consider. And could we consider maybe using umbrellas, again, for the weather and also for the goals?
Have some sort of umbrella or some sort of covering, which tends to detract the goals from certainly bothering people who are utilising the tables and chairs. And it's not actually reflected in the policy, but it's certainly something we can look at when we go out to consultation and maybe incorporate something if it's necessary.
Councillor Denham.
Thank you. I genuinely have been waiting for this report. In fact, I've been waiting for it for several months because as Cathedral Ward councillor, I think, a disproportionate number of the pavement licences have been in my ward, in our ward. It is a legacy of the COVID sort of eat out to help out, which served a function. It has changed the vibe in the city centre on the whole positively, but actually the sort of the temporary regime really has not worked satisfactorily for anybody. There's been an administrative burden because it's to be renewed every 6 months for the businesses, for regulatory services. As a local councillor, 7 days to comment on an application or the assumption is it's okay is just a ridiculously short time scale. And it's difficult to tell whether it's a new application, a changed application, or it's a repeat of exactly what they've already got on the high street. And the other point, which I know is a sort of huge frustration, to many of us, but I guess particularly to regulatory services, that with that temporary regime basically had no enforcement because the enforcement was down to the Highways Authority who didn't. So it's difficult to tell whether, the overreaching of tables was approved, not approved, should be enforced or not. So I'm really, really pleased that we're moving towards a more sensible and a more controlled approach. And yes, the level of clutter on our high streets is a really important consideration. And I know, that the equality implications and the reference to people with sight disabilities is a really important one. If I can just kind of add in that, there is a tendency from businesses to squeeze just the walking space, the pedestrian space, and in terms of active travel, space for pedestrians and also kind of mobility scooters and for people to walk side by side if you're going to town, with a friend or partner. So I think, there has been a supposed minimum distance. It's a bit challenging, and I guess that is one of the things in terms of the draft policy that people may want to look at with regard to advocacy. So I absolutely welcome progress towards a more controllable and a more business and high street friendly regime, and commend this for consultation.
Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't think I missed it, but would I be right in thinking that famous A boards are not part of this regime. And,
That's correct, Councillor, yeah, they're not, unfortunately.
So how do they get brought into this? Maybe it's not your gift, but just wondering, is there another step that we need to take as a council to start looking at those, because they are a massive problem, especially for sight impaired people?
Possibly. That responsibility still sits with the Highways under the Highways Act. It isn't part of this, and there isn't any proposal to bring it in as part of the pavement licensing scheme. So I think discussions would need to take place with the Highways Authority on how they can be controlled and monitored.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. So to clarify, that from the time that an application comes in, there's 14 days of consultation and then 14 days for a decision to be made. So 28 days is the total time frame.
That's correct. It's not much of an improvement on the temporary scheme. So from the date that we receive the application, it's 14 days. That's the consultation period. That's where everybody has an opportunity to put forward their comments. Then the further 14 days, the council must consider and either grant or reject the application. If they fail to do so, the application is deemed as granted. So they will get what they want if it isn't considered within that time scale.
So on that basis, are there any issues that you think that would prevent us making those decisions in a timely way? Thinking about WRS timeframes and whether there's an additional demand that you haven't had to meet at the moment, but you might need to meet under this timeframe.
Certainly not for Worcester City. We've been dealing with applications all the way through since we've taken on the responsibility of the shared service. We may see an increase in applications because there are one or two out there at the moment that aren't licensed that should be, and new premises will come along. But I can't see it causing too many problems for officers because we're doing it at the moment. And when we were doing under the temporary scheme, under the 7 days, it was a struggle, but you know it was being met. So hopefully we should be able to carry on.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
I completely agree about A-boards, and there's a place very close to here where the A-boards plus the payment furniture contribute to an obstacle to people with lesser mobility, and they have complained directly on it. So I agree with that. In terms of running the temporary scheme, how many applications have actually been refused, or an assessment of how many have been amended as a result of an application coming in and your officer thinks it needs to be manipulated? Or are you completely dependent on the results of consultation?
It's a bit of both. I haven't got the figures for you. We have refused a number of applications. So what tends to happen now is we go out to consultation, we consult with the responsible authorities, highways, local ward members, and then comments are received. They're also advertised on the council's website, so and other businesses are notified by way of a public notice. We have point blank refused some where there is just totally inappropriate. There isn't enough space on the pavement. New Street's a good example. Number of premises along New Street have had licences refused. We've had other applications where maybe the number of tables and chairs is too much, or the siting of them is such that, again, it doesn't quite meet policy. Sorry, I'm being attacked by a fly here, and I don't know why. It won't leave me alone. So, yes, they have been refused. I can get the figures for you if you'd like me to. It isn't too difficult. But when it comes to it, what we're tending to find now is that applications are being modified. So a good example, we had one recently in Angel Street where, oh no, that isn't a good example. That's where we were working to sort of old plans. There's certainly a premises that I'm aware where they put a number of tables and chairs, and the tables were reduced, the number of tables and chairs, and the locations were changed, so that it didn't impact on the pavement, and so that they still were granted a licence, but it was still accessible via pushchairs, wheelchairs, and other members of the public.
And finally, I was slightly surprised to see no examples of good practice of people placing furniture, or even specifications of furniture, which I know some cities have gone for. insisting on, for example, of a screened barrier around. We don't appear to have any physical recommendations in our report. It's pretty laissez-faire.
It's part of the conditions. I mean, we talk about the barrier, and that's one of the things that we've actually put in. So if you look at condition 6 on page 259, we've actually got a condition stating that all of them should have, not necessarily a screened barrier, but a barrier that is identifiable to people with visual impairment. So metal bars at the bottom, metal bars at the top. So there is something in there, but not quite to the degree that you've mentioned.
It used to be that for serving of drinks, you have to go within a defined area, and now potentially can spill out. Is that the case? Is the control physically constrained by this policy?
It isn't. I think you identify your area. So the expectation is that the area, you wouldn't expect them to go beyond with drinks. If it tends to cause a problem, there are two regimes there. You've got the Licensing Act to deal with any issues with the alcohol, but the pavement licensing area is very much for people sitting down, consuming drinks and food.
Sorry, so is outside drinking forbidden unless it's in seats, and is that a different legislation?
It's not forbidden, no. The consumption of alcohol isn't forbidden in any locality unless it's expressly identified on a particular premises licence.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, should we move to the vote? So this vote is to consider the Business Planning Act, which makes pavement licences regime permanent, and considers the draft pavement licensing policy shown in Appendix 1, and notes the report be presented to a committee in November 2024. Can I see a show of hands in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, last but definitely not least is the Street Collectors Code of Conduct, and that's you, Zoe. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologise. The majority of people do it responsibly. They book in with us, they have licences, they'll have a Chartered Institute of Fundraising booking with us. So the majority of them are responsible. But over the past 12 months, we've noticed some not so good collections going on, and some people who are going in under the sort of avoiding the legislation and collecting, and they're quite aggressive. They're not, they are constantly badgering people, which makes it very uncomfortable on the high street for people. And we want to try and stop that and prevent that. Now, we've been working with the police and the Safer Worcestershire Partnership, who have suggested that actually putting up and advertising the Street Collectors Code of Conduct will help when we're approaching them to point out while what we're saying, that there is a code of conduct, there is a way of behaving, and this is what we're expecting them to work by, and if not, then we can actually look at getting the police to remove them. So the police have suggested that this is a good way of doing it for them to be able to challenge the behaviour. Now, the majority of authorities have a code of conduct, but there are very few that actually advertise them on the high street. The one I've found in the report is from Glasgow. Now, we aren't intending to go as large as the Glasgow ones. They won't be taking over half the high street, so we're not adding to the furniture in the high street, but they will be visible enough so people can see them, and anybody can challenge then if the behaviour is inappropriate or not what we're expecting. So and we can then look at public space protection orders if it is becoming a major issue. But hopefully this will allow us to challenge. We are monitoring, we are reporting to the police when these collectors are on site and within the high street, but this gives us another way of challenging them and being able to speak to them on the day that they are there. So it's just to let you know that we are looking at putting that signage up. So if there's any questions or queries on that.
Councillor Pingree.
Yeah, I just had a query about, I guess, what the code of conduct would look like on the high street. In 2.7, you have like an image. Is that the one of Glasgow that you were talking about, where they've got the busking one?
Quite large one, so I always think it's small signage. Sorry. Small signage that will be attached to lampposts or stuff that's already in place on the high street.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Councillor Kimberley.
Thank you. I was going to say, I'm sure I'm not the only one to have gone through this, but I have also been solicited by someone who was collecting and was not clearly marked. It would seem that, I mean, obviously the one you've got from Glasgow is very comprehensive, but it would seem to me that the really salient problem is a failure to identify who you are and what you're collecting for. I think one of the other things that might be helpful to include, I presume that it will have been anyway, but it's just something to throw in, is a point of contact for who to speak to if someone is soliciting improperly. I noticed actually on the graphic I've got here, there is something about contacting the council if you want to collect and you want to do it correctly, which is fantastic, but I don't think there is any way to sort of raise a query or email regulatory services if you're a member of the public. So that's just a thought I wanted to throw in. Thank you.
Noted, we'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Councillor Stephen.
Yeah, I think it looks like quite a good idea to have the rules on display so everyone knows about it. Just one suggestion is over time they might get knocked and get a bit shabby and they get ultraviolet light on them and they'll get a bit faded and cracked and whatever. So I think it's great to try it out, but one other suggestion might be that we do actually have a little notice board on the railings of the Guildhall, which we normally use for election purposes. So obviously when we haven't got elections, we could use that as a little notice board. We could put this perhaps as a backup thing to do is in addition to what you're suggesting there. It might just, it's another place where it can permanently be and it wouldn't get knocked or damaged and so on as well. So just another place you could put it.
We are actually looking at the notice boards across the city to see if that they would be a better place to put them. But they'll be in a mixture of places. But yeah, that suggestion will be taken forward. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, I realise it's very late. Should we move to a vote? So this is just to inform members, so we are just noting at this point. So anyone in favour? Okay. Any abstentions? Against?
Just that I haven't seen the paper. I didn't get a printed version, so I actually don't know what we're talking about. So
would you like to take? It's on the website. Would you like to take a minute to read it, or?
That's fine.
So you're happy to abstain, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Sarah, were you saying the same thing?
Yeah, my paper stopped at page 249, so I'm just listening back in the presentation, so I feel happy I've been talked through it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, in that case, that's gone through. And thank you all for your time. And thank you.
Thank you.